Okay.
You thought about that one, yeah.
All right, people, let's get started here. Welcome to the first public hearing of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm your chairman, Kumar Barves, accompanied by my vice chair, Dana Stein. And we have, how many bills do we have? We have 9 bills, we have 52 witnesses, and the bills are going to be in basically this order, for the most part numerical. House Bill 34, Delegate Hill, followed by House Bill 8, Delegate Amprey, House Bill 81, also Delegate Amprey, House Bill 23, Delegate Stewart, 98, Delegate Ahrens, House Bill 101, Delegate Charkoudian, and then we will end with 3 highly obscure bills by Delegate Holmes, 2980 and 105. So let us go to Delegate Hill with House Bill 34. We have 2 minutes for sponsors and for witnesses, and then we'll go straight to questions. And take it away, Delegate.
All right, so House Bill 34, I introduced to try and address one of the problems we have with eviction, failure to pay rent cases. Some people have called this the Scarlet E problem, where when a filing for failure to pay rent is made, those records become available, and tenant screening reporting companies combine that information of a filing along with criminal background and credit check history, and sell those to landlords. Well, certainly landlords should know about tenants who or have problems with paying rent and are perpetual violators. But a filing is not a finding that someone has failed to pay rent. And what this bill does, first, is it prohibits a landlord from increasing a tenant's rent simply because they have a finding, a court finding that they failed to pay rent. But more importantly, it allows for the sealing of a record of a filing if that filing did not actually result in a judgment. So if I'm accused and it turns out that I'm not guilty, or I settle with my landlord and I pay the rent and I pay my late fee and I pay my fines and everything's fine, then that information is different than that I was accused and I didn't pay rent and the landlord had to chase me down and the landlord's out of money. And so all we're trying to do is to say that you don't treat someone who fails to pay rent the same way you treat someone who pays the rent. That's essentially what this bill does. There are some amendments that are offered by the Maryland Multi-Housing Alliance or Association that have worked with us on this legislation for the past 3 years. Those amendments are still being worked on and considered because some of our advocates for this bill and advocates for housing tenants have some issues with it, but I think everyone's working in good faith, and hopefully by sometime next week we'll have this completely worked out. So I just want to be clear, this is not a bill to shield records of a judgment against someone for failing to pay rent or for being evicted or having a judgment of eviction. Landlords can still find out about those tenants and make decisions about whether they want to take those risks. It simply says that if you don't fall in that category and you have either settled your case satisfied the things with your landlord, if the judge has said there's no finding against you, that you should be able to walk out of that court without being tagged and labeled for years down the road. Thank you.
I'll tell you what, we've got one person, two people who are signed up in person to testify in favor. We'll go to them and then we'll go to questions. I believe, Trish, we've got one person who's signed up virtually, right? Two people who've signed up virtually. Okay, so you want me to go through the virtuals and then go to questions? Is that the best way to work it for the system? Okay, well, let's go to Jennifer Mercer, who's with the Pro Bono Resource Center of Maryland. Jennifer, if you'd come up, and you have 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Mercer. I'm a staff attorney at the Pro Bono Resource Center of Maryland, where I represent tenants who are facing eviction. In 2022, we represented tenants in about 1,250 failure to pay rent cases in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. These complaints are often filed not by the landlord, but by third-party entities who are employed by the landlord for this purpose. About 1/3 of the cases in which we provided representation in 2022 were dismissed. This can happen because the tenant has paid the rent, there's an administrative error with payment processing, the person listed on the complaint is not who is actually responsible on the lease, there are errors such as the incorrect monthly amount on the complaint, or the landlord is not themselves in compliant, strike that, the tenant doesn't live there anymore. Tenants can also receive judgment in their favor because the tenant proves to the court that they paid, or a judge finds that the conditions of the rental unit are hazardous, or the landlord is themselves out of compliance with regard to licensing. Right now, however, these tenants are stuck with a black mark on their record in a very tight rental market here in Maryland, just based on the fact that a case was filed against them. Now, some tenants I speak to do receive judgments against them in failure to pay rent court. Most often, they suffer from common life circumstances such as caring for a sick relative, domestic violence, personal illness, things of that nature that have caused their financial problem. But the law does allow them the opportunity to make things right and avoid eviction. Many tenants do end up doing this by paying in full what is owed to the landlord, and they too are stuck with this on their record forever. House Bill 34 allows a fresh start for these Marylanders, as we do in such matters as criminal expungement, shielding of peace and protective orders, and the pandemic failure to pay rent shielding bill that passed last year. In light of Maryland's housing crisis, this is more important now than ever before. Pro Bono Resource Center urges a favorable report on House Bill 34. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and I've been asked to ask the virtual
Thank you very much, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. Thank you also for inviting me to testify here today. I'm not going to prolong this. I understand. I heard 9 bills and 52 witnesses, so I'll try not to go my full 2 minutes. We do support this bill because of the relief that it grants. We know that there are over 125,000 families in the state of Maryland who pay more than 30% of their of their income for rent. That these folks are and that 125,000 number of families are folks who, that's the shortage of affordable housing that we have in this state, and we believe that to be a conservative estimate. You know, in regard to the amendments that have been proposed, we will very carefully examine them. I would simply say, though, that one of the problems we have with one of those amendments that would seem to allow or disallow the sealing of court records that are involved in, say, a foreclosure of the right to redeem, that is, to limit them to no more than 3 in a year, that this seems to punish those 125,000 families who, through no fault of their own, can't afford the rent. And it puts them sort of in a permanent sort of cast of unworthies, because as the delegate has stated, the filing alone can in fact impact the ability of the person to be able to get subsequent housing. And one of the things that we are discovering, rather disturbingly, though this has been a problem, at least that was pointed out to the court since 2000, is that there's a problem here with service of these complaints. And I will wrap it up. And so because there's a problem with service of those complaints, we have many folks who have judgments against them that are not deserved because service has not been perfected. And so with that, we will participate in that conversation if, of course, we're invited.
Have a virtual witness, Albert Turner with the Public Justice Center. And there's Albert Turner. So welcome to the Environment Transportation Committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, delegates, for taking the time out to hear us on the bill. I'd like to thank Delegate Hill for bringing this bill forward. My name is Albert Turner. I am a staff attorney with the Public Justice Center. I am also a member of Renters United Maryland, and we are here to ask for a favorable report for the bill H34, particularly the original bill as originally constructed. Now, I've written testimony can give out numbers of the benefit of this bill and what it will do for a lot of tenants, particularly in the universe where we are living in, where rent is incredibly high and there's a housing shortage. Shielding a lot of these dismissals and other judgments for tenants would allow a lot more housing to be available to very qualified tenants in that regard. For the amendments, we would also like to vocalize and repeat some of the talking points from legal aid. We have seen some of those amendments. We do have a coalition that needs to gather and have those type of talks as to whether or not we are willing to move on this point. There's also, in addition to the cap on the 3 judgments from being shielded within a year, there's also a writ escrow issue as to whether or not that can be shielded or not. Rent escrow is a process can be used as a defense in a failure to pay rent case, and that being able to be shielded in relation to its failure to pay rent case from which it stems seems to be pretty something that we would really like. So for that purposes, we would ask for a favorable report on the original bill to have this discourse on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go to questions. Are there any questions for the sponsor or any of these witnesses who are in favor? I don't see any, so thank you very much. We'll go to the person who's been signed up unfavorable, who is virtual, Dana Schultz, who I understand, and there she is. Ms. Schultz, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm Dana Schultz. I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran. I hold a bachelor's degree in public affairs and a master's in counseling. As I read through House Bill 34, I oppose it as an invasive piece of legislation forcing individual business owners to make decisions based upon the state's decree of risk assessment. It is the property owner's right and responsibility to determine appropriate rent to charge dependent upon many factors. The tenant then freely decides where they live. Freedom to choose is the bedrock of a constitutional republic. Constitutional republics are set up to protect the rights of people to choose. And this freedom is provided to Marylanders. This gives us the freedom to conduct business without government regulations. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? Well, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes, what's that? Oh, you're right, pardon me. We've got an informational testimony from Ryan Washington with AOPA. Ryan, come on up. And I think that's going to be it in terms of witness testimony. Ryan, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I will keep my comments very brief because I know you all have a long day. For the record, my name is Ryan Washington. I represent the Apartment Office Building Association. We represent about 133,000 rental units across Montgomery and Prince George's counties. You all have my written testimony, and I've spoken with the bill sponsor just on a few of our concerns regarding this legislation, and we are working on some amendments with the bill sponsor just to highlight specifically the provisions where rent increases can't be offered during the time of, solely during the time of judgment. We just want something clarifying in the event that a housing provider did provide a rent increase for a good faith and reasonable effort, possibly increase in operational costs, utility costs, or such that's reasonable. We wanted just some clarifying language just to protect against that in the event that does occur between a housing provider and resident. With that, I'll keep my comments to a conclusion, and I'm open to any questions.
All right. We've got a question from Delegate Terraza.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, and I appreciate your comments. Sorry, I'll take this off. Are you favorable with amendments? Because you said information, like you're registered as informational, but it sounds like you're saying you're favorable if those amendments go through.
Well, in this case, yes. I want to, we're working with the bill sponsor, and she's been more than agreeable to work with us. So we expect to have some type of resolution by next week and some amendments that would introduce. So,
And then you'd be favorable.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions and no further witnesses, so that ends the public hearing on House Bill 34. We will now go to House Bill 8. Delegate Ampry, welcome back to the committee that you so cruelly abandoned.
Well, it's only fitting that my first time doing a live testimony is
That's right.
is here back home in the Environment and Transportation Committee. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah, good to see you.
For the record, Delegate Marlon Ampry for 40th District, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein. It's a pleasure to be amongst you all today. Today you'll be hearing a bill for the third time, hoping the third time is a charm. House Bill 8, a food environment bill. This bill is being introduced for the purpose of requiring the Departments of Housing and Community Development, Planning, Human Services, and Agriculture to jointly produce a biannual report to the General Assembly on the state of food environments in each county and state legislative district in Maryland, with the reports to include metrics that determine food insecurity zones. You've all heard this bill many times. Those who are new to the committee, this is the third time we brought this bill forward. And the purpose of this bill is this. I believe that we cannot fix what you cannot measure. Currently, we really do have issues with food insecurity across the state, particularly in my district. We are the legislative district with the most amount of food deserts. The accessibility for individuals to get fresh food is really difficult. I know we are currently in a time where food is very expensive. I've eaten some very expensive omelets and scrambled eggs these days. And I have to say that when we think about the expense of food at the store, we also have to think about those who are now paying more for food are still having to pay a lot to get to the store. And it's really an inconvenience for many members of my community and people across the state from the shore to Western Maryland. And the purpose of this bill is to have the state create a baseline metric for how we are able to measure and understand where food insecurity issues lie. The map that you are looking at right now is a map that was created by Johns Hopkins in 2012. We also have a map from 2018 that was also created by Johns Hopkins. And what this map details is the accessibility for food based on really refined metrics to understand that the state currently doesn't have. This bill came to mind for me when I was sitting on the Economic Matters Committee meeting during my first term. I learned about the push for there to create some more incentives to get grocery stores to come to certain communities. And the issue was that no one could really define what a food desert was in that conversation. If we want to create more incentives and programs in order for us to get good grocery stores into communities that need them, we need proper baseline metrics in order to better understand that. I don't want to spend too much time taking up much time today. I know that you all have a lot on your plate today, but I just ask that you really consider this piece of legislation. And I wanted to just bring some data points. So the Association of Food Insecurity with Poor Health Outcomes also incurs higher health care costs. In Maryland, the total excess healthcare costs due to food insecurity totals over $925 million every year. And I say that so when you turn to that fiscal note today, you understand that a $925 million healthcare expenses that are hitting our constituents is a whole lot, and the cost of this bill is minuscule in comparison to that. And I also believe that we can work these numbers a little bit better on the fiscal note to make this a more affordable system. I think the first turn of these maps and these systems is going to be the most expensive part of that. I think the continued updating of the actual maps will be a lot less expensive as time goes on. And I just really urge a favorable report on this bill. It's just near and dear to my heart, and my community is really hurting when it comes to accessibility to food. Another grocery store closed in my community. The Baltimore Banner just covered it, and the community is really crying for help. So I hope that we can get this bill through this session, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have a question from Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, colleague. I really love this bill, but I do have one question and clarifying question. The fiscal note stated that it took Baltimore City a year alone just to do its map, according to somewhat of the specs that you listed, as well as kind of put it in per councilmatic district.
Yeah.
The question is would you be amenable to removing the legislative district portion? Because regardless, the information is the information. I'm not sure how much that weighs on them.
Right.
But it seems like to then do the per legislative district may be harder for them.
Yeah, I'm amenable to it. I think the reason that we originally went that route was again, going back to when I first heard the complication around them creating incentives for certain grocery stores to come to certain communities. Some of it was around like beer and wine licensing or other incentives that are tax-based and things that already go towards a legislative district. So my goal was to create the map ready for us to hit the ground running on creating incentives per district. But I'm more than willing to.
But it would be per jurisdiction, correct?
Right. Yeah. I'm more than willing to work with the subcommittee on figuring out a way in which we can scale the maps by legislative district, by county, whatever makes the most sense for us to just ensure that we have a baseline map. So I'm more than willing to work with the subcommittee.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned a store or stores that were closed.
Yes.
Is there any indication as to why they were closing?
So we've had several stores close in my district, and honestly, they closed without giving us the full information as to why they're closed. And often, I will say this: a lot of the stores often close right after whatever tax incentive threshold time period stops. Often the store will go away. But my understanding is there's not really any clear reasoning as to why some of the stores have closed. I don't have that data point, and those stores aren't releasing that data so freely.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions, and no one else has signed up in favor. We do have one individual signed up in opposition virtually, and that's Dana Schultz again. Ms. Schultz, welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and for the record, I'm a Millersville resident, a United States Air Force combat veteran. I have a bachelor's degree in public affairs and a master's in counseling. Spending time and resources on the symptoms causing so much pain for our citizens is avoiding the root causes of government spending and increased crime and looting. Maryland's a breadbasket of food and fuel, which can provide bounty for all Marylanders. Marylanders want equal opportunity to produce and consume food without the government deciding for us what is healthy and who should be given food from the state. The verbiage in HB 08 sounds like Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030, when the government decides what foods to produce, whom the foods are distributed to in the community. The sustainable foods, which are highly acclaimed for the populace, are highly nutritious and easily produced, such as bugs. Other foods decided by the government, such as meat and dairy, become regulated and extremely costly and will only be available for the extremely wealthy. Stop spending money to study and implement food equity distribution. Equity is equal outcomes, and the state decides what foods are given to citizens. Equity requires that every person ends up at the same level. The lowest level is what the state-run systems offer. Look at public housing projects and living conditions. These are stark examples of failure. This stark opposition from the bounty of the foods that are available to all Marylanders. Marylanders want equal access to all foods across the entire state. This plan ultimately removes choices from individuals and hands over control to the government to provide food to citizens. Maryland does not need any more government interference blocking our breadbasket production and distribution. Big government depletes finances from everyday citizens. Get rid of the crime in the cities and stop the looting and get to the root causes of these food deserts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you so much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 8. Let's proceed to House Bill 81. Delegate Amprey.
Can you hear me now? All right, here we go. All right, for the record, Delegate Marlon Amprey, 40th District, Chairman Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and honorable members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. It is an honor to be with you today to voice my support for House Bill 81, another oldie but goodie, a bill that I brought forward last year. The House Bill 81 Live Near Where You Teach program. House Bill 81 requires the Community Development Administration and the Department of Housing and Community Development to administer a home buyer assistant program that assists teachers and all school staff members to receive certain low-interest mortgage programs for the purchase of homes near where the teacher or staff member is employed, and requires the administration to administer certain community development projects to provide all school staff members with certain financial assistance to buy homes near where the member is employed under certain circumstances. Before becoming an attorney and before becoming a legislator, I was a teacher, and where I taught, I always lived in the same zip code of my students. It allowed, first of all, allowed for a quick commute to work. But other than that, it also allowed for me to connect with my students. It allowed me to be able to understand the community environments that they were living in. You know, it's important to me that we create an environment where our teachers really understand what our students are going through. On top of that, currently at the moment, we are currently experiencing a nationwide teacher shortage. And we need to bring in and retain teachers in Baltimore, specifically in my district, and throughout the state of Maryland. This program made specifically for teachers will not only support our school staff by providing financial benefits, but it will also work to encourage, incentivize, and attract teachers in areas where we need them the most. While there is other programs that are currently in existence, this is not like the existing employer-based home buyer assistance programs because the purpose is specifically target teachers and education professionals to offer them simple and comprehensive relief while incentivizing them to live in their school communities. Unlike other employers and employees that may benefit from similar programs, the proximity of teachers to their schools can have a direct impact on student learning outcomes and well-being. Additionally, having a lower turnover rate with school staff and teachers will help our schools thrive. And I truly believe that if we have more teachers deciding to buy homes in the communities in which they serve, I think that we can really address the turnover issue. They will be rooted and grounded into supporting our schools, communities, and the families that are there. So I want to keep it short, so I ask that we really consider and support this bill. I think it really solves a lot of issues that currently face our state in regards to a teacher shortage, in regards to also communities that need more population and more density, especially here in my home district of Baltimore. And thus I urge a favorable report on House Bill 81, and I thank you for allowing me to speak today. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, we'll go to all the witnesses in favor, and then we'll proceed to questions. Next witness in person is Diamante Brown. Come on up. You have, and once you start, you will have 2 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diamond Tay Brown. I am the president of the Baltimore Teachers Union. I am also a certified teacher in physical education, K through 12. And I've also been born and raised in Baltimore, and I am a Baltimore homeowner myself. Baltimore Teachers Union represents over 8,000 school employees, Baltimore City Schools employees, and the majority of them are teachers. And we are in support of House Bill 81. Many of the teachers in Baltimore City, actually I would say an overwhelming majority, do not live in Baltimore City. And we want our teachers to live in Baltimore City. And a lot of teachers don't live in Baltimore City because it's actually cheaper to live in other counties. And so we believe House Bill 81 incentivizes people to live in Baltimore City and can possibly make it more affordable to live in Baltimore City. And unfortunately, there are a lot of disincentives for living in Baltimore City, like crime and our school system. And so we need to counter those disincentives with incentives like the ones that House Bill 81 provides. And lastly, I want to say, like Delegate Ampry stated, that when teachers live where their students live, we get to have shared experiences with our students, and we get to have a better understanding of how we can support them beyond academics. And we can work more close to where we work, which allows us to participate in things like extracurricular activities and be coaches. So for those reasons, I urge a favorable report for House Bill 81. Sorry, I'm a teacher, so we try to be, succinct.
No, that's good. That's good. We have virtual witness Franca Moeller with the Baltimore Teachers Union. Franca, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Franca Mueller-Paz. I'm a Baltimore City resident and a teacher since 2010, and I deeply support House Bill 81. This bill will financially support educators by granting low-interest mortgages for the purchase of homes near where these educators are employed. And we need incentives like this bill now more than ever. Teachers and para-educators are leaving the profession in droves with huge spikes in resignations and early retirements. According to our State Department of Education, nearly 1 in every 10 teachers left the classroom at the end of last year. And those of us left behind have been surviving in chaos. As many of you remember, schools opened their doors this year with districts reporting hundreds and hundreds of vacancies. And these vacancies have led to a lot of sacrifices for those of us left behind. Special educator teachers and English for speakers of other language teachers are chasing their ballooning caseloads. And our class sizes have exploded with over 35 kids in a classroom or 200 kids overall on your load. And while we try to find hours in the day to call families, to grade hundreds of papers, to build meaningful relationships and more, even when I keep the most exhausting pace, you never get ahead of where you need to be. And as educators continue to leave, their absence only pushes more and more of our teachers out the door. But we can reverse this awful cycle by valuing our educators and offering them incentives like this bill. In addition to being an important incentive, having teachers in our communities provides many direct benefits to students. After-school programs rely on the participation of educators. One way we can see more coaches and advisors for our kids' teams and clubs is to reduce the commute of our educators. One teacher told me, who lives 45 minutes from our school, do I stay and coach this season, or do I go home and remember what my husband and kids look like? We want educators who understand our kids and their motivations, and being able to live in the same communities can build these bridges. As Randy Weingarten, president of the Federation of Teachers, says, it's important for teachers to live and make roots in the communities where they teach, yet renting or buying a home in an expensive city is financially out of reach for so many educators, and salary increases alone won't do the trick. I urge everyone to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a number of questions. I wonder how many are serious. Okay, Delegate Terraza. I was expecting everybody to put their hand up or something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Ampry, for bringing this bill. I think it's so important. and such a good idea. And for the record, I thought the last bill was as well. Just really quickly, I wanted to find out if you had given consideration, given the blueprint's call for expansion of pre-K and the shortage of pre-K teachers, to including them in this bill.
Yeah. This would include pre-K, those who have dedicated their lives to the profession of teaching. That's who we want this bill to be supportive of. So those who have decided, I'm going to ensure that our children have bright futures, I want to make sure they have access to a house they can afford and live near and where they provide that care to kids.
Wonderful. So you think they're already covered, but
Based on the language we have here, I think it is, but
Okay.
if we need to alter the language to make sure
Awesome.
that they are included, I'm more than willing to do so.
thank you so much.
So this is, there's no fiscal note, but this is a bill that will allow the program to be created and be funded later. So there's no fiscal note as of yet, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we do? I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Hold up. That's why I have my set. There is fiscal note, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Empry. Welcome back to the committee, and thank you for bringing this bill again to the committee. I think this is a great idea, and it's wonderful that we're thinking of how to support our teachers in such innovative ways. I do have one question, though. My question is, in terms of the bill says that it's for, the program is for teachers who buy homes near where they teach. And I just wondered if you have given any thought or if there's anything in the bill that defines what that means. You know, what is your thought on the geographics? Is it just like the city, or is it more narrow than that? Or?
Yeah, my intent with the bill is to live near the actual school where you teach, so not just in the district where you teach. My goal, the intent of the bill is to live as close as possible to where you actually teach. Again, going back to, you know, the little story I told at the beginning, where there's a deeper connection you get to have with your students. You have that shorter commute to work, because even if you live in Baltimore City, it can be a long drive around to the other side of the city. That's, you know, just as long as if you lived in the county. So the goal here is to be near the actual physical building where you provide teaching.
Right, and I agree with that concept. I just wondered if there was any way to sort of you know, make that happen rather than have someone live on the other side of the city and say, "Well, I live near the city because I live near the school because I live in the same city."
Yeah. I'm willing to work with the committee on making that language be more concise and clear.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate Ampry. As a proud homeowner for almost 19 years of a Live Near Your Work program, I certainly appreciate this bill. And just for background information, it was a mile or so radius around the institution that I worked that, you know, you can buy within this area, and then you get the benefits. So I just wanted to put that out there for Delegate Foley. But I did want to, you alluded to earlier about similar programs, and there is a mention about it. Can you help us, so that we can certainly be supportive of this, help us understand what is the difference between your program and the House Keys program? Because I don't know anything about the House Keys program.
The House Keys for Employees program, my understanding is it's a program that certain employers and systems can join, and then the employees have to then use that program. And I can't describe it because it's confusing. So I think I think its confusing nature of it, it kind of isn't working to get more teachers to use the program. And also, DHCD has stated that because our program is very identical, that they can implement the bill with existing budgeted resources. So even the creation of this program that's teacher specific, we're giving a signal to teachers that we want you here in our communities. I think it will allow for there to be a more attention on the issue, and it doesn't create a situation where there's additional funds taken away. The DHCD is saying that they can make it happen.
Sure. So do you see schools then creating that mile radius or so around their schools to kind of create the geographic boundary to live near your school?
Yeah.
And then as far as I think I'm reading this correctly, that program matches up to $3,500 for down payment, but I think Live Near Your programs work where the institution and the state and the feds all add money. So are you anticipating later when this becomes fundable that the schools or the school system would be adding a line item to assist with the Live Near Your program, Live Near Your work program?
If it's within their budgetary abilities, yes.
Okay, perfect.
If it's
Thanks so
within the
much.
budget. I'd love to see that happen.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Ampry, for bringing this bill. I am new to this committee, but I know education, so I'm really happy that there's finally something I can sink my teeth into today. I'm going to love it, though. Going to love it. So I have many of the same questions that my colleagues have already thrown at you, so you are all on top of it. One was the need to define near, but also just looking at the language of the bill, I would say look very carefully at the definition of who is going to be eligible, because as written, it does not include any pre-K teachers who aren't officially in the elementary school, and with the mixed delivery system that we're going to roll out through the blueprint, that will leave a lot of pre-K teachers out. I would also, this probably is maybe too much for this year, for this bill, but maybe also encourage you to look at expanding the bill after hopefully it passes this year to school counselors, administrators, principals, others that really have an impact on the community. So my other question was about live where you work. So I think we've got them all, but thank you so much for bringing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to the committee, Delegate Ampry. Actually, my question is similar to Delegate Guyton's. Thank you for bringing this great bill, but I just wondered, does it all cover education support professionals in addition to teachers?
Yeah, our goal is to cover as many individuals who, again, like my goal is if you are dedicated to teaching and preparing our children for their future, that's who I want to support to make sure that they have accessibility. So I'm more than willing to work with the committee to make sure the language captures as many professionals because we know that our teacher shortage goes beyond just teachers, right? We know that our paraprofessional shortage, all those shortages affect the in and outs of the classroom. So I think the more people we can include that are actually committed to the teaching profession or in the administrator role, et cetera, I'm more than willing to make sure that we get the language right to make sure that happens. And you know, we're still in January, so we got plenty of time to get this bill right. You know.
Thank you.
It's my opportunity to come back and work with y'all more. That's all I'm trying to do here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Ampry, thanks again for being here. Fantastic idea. My question, again, we've talked a little bit about, maybe the physical and jurisdictional limits to the bill, or including language that specifies those limits. Would you be open as well to including, for lack of a better term, timing parameters for, again, to limit this benefit, in case a person who becomes a teacher decides they don't want to teach immediately after receiving this this benefit, something along those lines?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And I think under other programs, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm happy to talk about this more later offline, that if you leave the profession or leave this area after a certain, you have to pay back a certain amount of money, if I'm not mistaken. So I would put in those same rules. And the other thing to think about here also is, we know the unfortunate nature of school closures, right? You might have bought a house near a school, that school closes, you now live 6 miles away from, but you're still teaching. I think that we have to put in some language in here to make sure that they're not penalized because their school closed, right? So, but yeah, I'm more than happy to make sure that we get that language right.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, next question goes to Kelly Jacobs.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Ampry, I was just trying to get some clarification in the bill on page 2. Line 11 talks about any other school employee. Could you give me a little definition there?
So And this is why I was really trying to make sure that we don't exclude anyone who, again, is committed to the profession of teaching. So I think paraprofessional, well, we have paraprofessional, but any other individual who works in the school full-time, who works with kids. So I'm not talking about a person who is contracted to come work at the school and provide some type of IT or something, right? Who's a contracted person who bounces around. We're talking about people who are committed to the days and days in and out of school. So I can't think of any others, another school employee off the top of my head. I haven't worked in the school in a minute, so I know that there's a multitude of other employees that have important responsibilities when it comes to the kids. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't exclude. I know that there's times we are making legislation around educators that sometimes we just exclude individuals who are working with kids every day. So I want to make sure that we're not excluding those persons. So nothing off the top of my head, but I'm more than happy to talk offline about who those individuals include.
With like janitors and kitchen staff that were full-time, would they be included in as other school employees?
I would be open to ensuring that those who are providing the meals for our kids and work with our kids and make sure they're fed and that they're healthy. I think they should be included with the opportunity to continue to serve in the community, live in the community, and serve our students.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a hard time being a skunk at the garden party. But bluntly put, I have a problem with anybody telling me where to live.
Okay.
Okay? And I first taught at Eastern High School in the district, but I lived way up in Montgomery County. The burden of transportation was on me. It was a wonderful experience. So given your position right here, I'd be forced to live close to Eastern High School.
Okay. Well, it wouldn't be forced. It's just if you.
I wouldn't teach there then.
Well, I mean, it's not. We're not requiring you to live next to your school. We're saying that if you want to buy a house, so let's say you are teaching, you live in Montgomery County, you live in Prince George, you live in another county, and you're like, you know what, I want to buy a house, and now you can say, now we have an incentive to say, hey, if you buy a house near your school, we're going to help you out. This is not a requirement that you have to live. You have to. This is saying, hey, if you do, we're going to give you some assistance because we appreciate your sacrifice to be a teacher. And my mom actually went to Eastern, so I didn't even know that. So that's the conversation I had.
We'll talk about this over an adult beverage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Ampry, great bill. Thank you for being here. Quick question. I know there's a lot of discussion referencing paraeducators. I'm wondering as well, too, it may be difficult given there may be some contractors, but bus drivers as well, too. For some counties, they're actually county employees. For some jurisdictions, they're actually contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Are you amenable to that as well, too?
Again, we have a shortage on bus drivers, so that's something that we have to discuss in more detail because I'm not really clear on how that would work because they're not solely in one location. As a bus driver, I don't know how that would necessarily work, but happy to talk about that later. That's something to think about though, because we need some bus drivers. I'm trying to think who hasn't asked the question yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the bill. Just a point of clarification. Would it also, would teachers that teach in private schools be able to benefit from this legislation as well? We have a lot of Catholic schools in my district. Thinking about those kind of teachers, would they also be subject to this legislation?
So we didn't exclude private schools from this legislation. Again, we need teachers in every place, but I'm happy to talk offline about that in more detail. Currently, the focus right now for me is to get our public schools better staffed. We have that is where our duty is ensuring that as a state that our employees are taken care of. I think that is something that maybe we could amend later to see if that can happen. But I think the focus when I drafted this bill, the intent was to ensure that our public schools were fully staffed and that the teachers that are working in public schools have access to live near where they provide care to kids.
Thank you, Doug.
There appear to be no further questions for the witnesses in favor. We have one virtual witness signed up in opposition, Dana Schultz. 2 minutes.
For the record, I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran. I hold a bachelor's degree in public affairs, master's in counseling. I've also classically home educated my own children for the past 25 years, so I definitely believe in being close to your students since we live together. Teaching is the greatest calling of any Marylander as they pour into our children and the future of our state and nation. Affordable housing is in very short supply and is especially important for our teachers, who are such important servants of the children in our communities. I greatly appreciate House Bill 81, yet I oppose the language requiring communities to be limited to sustainable communities, which mirrors the UN Agenda 2030. When I examined the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, it sounds like this bill. The creeping ideas and verbiage of Agenda 2030 into every piece of Maryland legislation is abhorrent to Marylanders. We did not elect UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez, nor do we want any influence from him or any other globalist elites pushing their decade of action for delivery on the SDGs by 2030. This gives power to the state to decide the definition of sustainable, depending upon the ever-changing definitions determined by the moment. As incentives are provided, root causes need to be addressed as to why people are leaving due to these many different root causes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There appear to be no questions, and that will therefore, I believe that's the last witness. Yes, everybody else is written. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 81. Off with you now.
I'll be back, I promise.
Okay. Good to see you. All right, next, Delegate House Bill 23, Delegate Stewart.
Hey guys, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart. This is House Bill 23. This is the fourth bill we're hearing this session, but I'm proud to say the first bill that was not influenced by UN Agenda 2030. So, all right. So a little history of this bill. We passed it last year. It went over to the Senate and it languished in JPR, which is, I'm sure, a feeling that none of us have had. And this year, we've tried to come to even more of a consensus. Last year, we managed to get everyone to drop any opposition. This year, we're really aiming our sights on not just having no opposition from all stakeholders, but actually having all stakeholders buy into this idea and really embrace it. And so we worked really hard over the interim and also over the last couple of weeks to try to make that a reality. Other news is that we have a Senate cross-file who I think is friendly with several members of the community, and that's the committee, and that's Senator Bill Folden is helping us this year in the Senate as the Senate sponsor. The problem here is that mobile home communities, manufactured home communities, are being targeted by investment companies and private equity companies. They view these communities as a great investment opportunity. They buy them for a relatively good price, and then they do one of two things. They change the use to something that's not housing, thereby eliminating affordable housing, or they jack up the rents and try to extract as much value as possible out of residents who are often captive to those rent increases. Mobile home residents are more captive and more vulnerable than most Marylanders because they own their home, they own the mobile home, but they rent the land under it. And it can be extremely expensive for them to relocate to a different place. It can be $20,000, $30,000. Sometimes that's as much as they paid for their mobile home. And that's if there's a nearby community. Montgomery County has one mobile home community right now. So if that were to close because it was sold to an investment group or a private equity company like Blackstone or Berkshire Hathaway, a lot of these companies are buying them up, that would be bad news because anyone who lived there in Montgomery County, that worked in Montgomery County, worked in DC, they would not be able to live in Montgomery County anymore. So this bill proposes, I think, a novel solution, which is that unless buyers of these communities, when they're put up for sale, unless they can make commitments to either keeping the community as an affordable housing community or make commitments towards not jacking up the rents to a certain amount, then we want to make it easier for residents to collectively purchase the communities. Now, this may sound radical. Residents, I think, sometimes have difficulty doing this. There have been some successful cases, especially in New England, like in New Hampshire, working with lots of nonprofit groups, some that we'll hear from today, help residents do this. And so we want to have that option, that sort of backup option for residents to have an easier pathway to purchasing the communities and own it themselves, build some wealth that way, if the alternative is bleak, which is they lose their home or they're facing 50%, 60%, 75% rent increases is what's been reported across the country. And so happy to answer any questions. You're going to hear from both consumer advocates and from Horizon Land Company, which owns several of these communities, and I think by all accounts is a high road actor who shares all of our goal to keep these communities as affordable housing communities, to protect the residents, and to make sure that these vulture capitalists, if you will, do not swoop into Maryland and hurt our residents. And so I just want to tip my cap to people, stakeholders really on all sides, because they've all come together. I think we're probably days away from brokering a big compromise, and when we do, I'm happy to bring it before the committee, and so we can all kind of take a victory lap and celebrate a consensus victory.
Where is that community in Montgomery County?
It's just north of your district in Montgomery Village.
Okay. Well, let me go first to the in-person witnesses who are in favor, and those would be Michael Donnelly and Gregory Countess. So, Michael and Gregory, if you could come up and give us your 2 minutes each, and then we will go to the virtual witnesses and proceed to questions. So, who would like to go first? Michael?
Sit down first, maybe I'll do it. Okay. My name is Gregory Countess.
Okay.
I'm with Maryland Legal Aid, and we're here to testify in favor of House Bill 23. If I can relate to you just a little history of a client that Legal Aid had back. Sure. Just a client that Legal Aid had back in 2018. There are a group of homeowners who were appeared in rent court. And what were they complaining about? They were complaining about what, in their words, they described as outrageous water bills. And those outrageous water bills were about $150 to perhaps $200 more than what they had been used to paying monthly. This was a result of a change in ownership. The ownership change decided that the new owners decided that they were going to change the way that they assess costs for water because they believed that the old meters were not capturing what water was actually used, and so they went to a RUB system. And what this points out to is the problem that residents face when these communities have no control over their costs. Because they don't have control over their costs, then actually some of those costs are jacked up. The housing becomes unaffordable, just like the sponsor, Delegate Stewart, says. And so in this community in Harford County, which was in Bush River community, these new policies, as I said, were directly tied to the new ownership group. And so this bill, which is, we believe, modest in scope, but offers just such big rewards, and so therefore, we believe, or excuse me, we would urge this committee to favorably pass this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Michael Donnelly. All right. Honorable Chair Barve, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Michael Donnelly, and I'm from Economic Action Maryland. We used to be called Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, and we're a nonprofit organization that works to advance, economic justice, equity throughout the state through direct service, advocacy, research, etc. And so we did submit written testimony with a lot more numbers in it, but being in the committee room, I'm just going to go over some of the main points of why this is necessary legislation. So first and second are that manufactured homes are one of the last sources of sort of naturally occurring affordable housing out there. And, most of the median incomes for people that live in these communities are markedly lower than in sort of a brick and mortar renting situation. At the same time, these homes are much more readily modifiable so that they can be compliant with ADA requirements. If there's a disabled person that needs a home that can be modified, this is like a very, very good way to house them. But despite these benefits, for the most part, they might own the home, they do not own the land it sits on. So this puts them in a very precarious position. And if there's a sale, if there's a transfer in ownership, they can be on the hook, very short amount of notice, and then have to spend thousands of dollars, which they probably don't have on hand, to move their home to a new community. And that is if there is a space in another community nearby. So what often happens in these cases is people will be displaced because they can't afford much higher rents, fees, or a change in land use. And without the money to move somewhere else, they basically lose the equity because they're forced to abandon the home. And, all that they paid in to own this home is no longer available. So for those reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report. Thank you.
All righty, we will go to the first virtual witness, Carolyn Carter with the National Consumer Law Center. Carolyn, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Carolyn Carter. I'm the Deputy Director of the National Consumer Law Center. We're a nonprofit specializing in consumer issues that affect low-income and elderly consumers. And we've long had a focus on manufactured home communities, particularly policies and laws that give residents the right to purchase their communities. By giving residents this opportunity, House Bill 23 would be a great step forward in stabilizing and improving manufactured home communities in Maryland. When residents own a manufactured home community, they know it will not be closed and that they will continue to have an affordable place to live. So they invest in it. They repave the roads, they fix the sewer, they add landscaping and amenities. They make it a nice place to live. This benefits not just the residents, but also the community at large. A key factor that makes laws like this effective is keeping it simple. The basic goal can simply be to give the residents the time and information they need to make an offer. Notably, this bill just gives residents an opportunity to make an offer. It doesn't require them to do so, nor does it require the park owner to sell to the residents, but only to give consideration in good faith to their offer if they make one. This simple approach has been very effective in other states. For example, thanks to a New Hampshire law very similar to HB 23, 145 manufactured home communities there, close to a third of those in the state, are now resident-owned. They represent stable, affordable, high-quality housing for 8,000 families. I want to encourage the committee to afford a purchase opportunity to the residents of all the manufactured home communities in the state whenever their manufactured home community is being sold. A few states, such as New York and New Jersey, have laws that afford a purchase opportunity only when the park is being sold for a change in use. Those laws have produced litigation, but have not resulted in a single resident purchase. And affording a purchase opportunity only when the community is being closed or is in danger of closing typically gives them the opportunity just at the point when the price has risen beyond their ability to pay. So I encourage you to pass HB 23, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Deborah Winowitz with the ROC Association. Deborah.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Deborah Winowitz, and I'm the Rock Association New England Director. I'm also a resident at Halifax Estates. That's an over 55 resident-owned community located in Halifax, Massachusetts. 5 years ago, a large private investment company made an offer to the family who owned the community to purchase the park. Due to Massachusetts having OTP laws in place, we, the residents, with assistance from Rock USA and CDI, Corporate Development Institute, were able to exercise our right to purchase the community as a resident co-op. Resident ownership brings peace of mind and security to residents, knowing that they now own the land that their homes sit on. There are times when a park is sold to a private investor. They want that valuable land, but they do not want the people that are living on it. That is a serious problem in every state in this country. OTP in states allows notice and allows time to secure mortgages and to finalize the offer, paving the way to resident ownership. Mobile home parks are affordable housing for seniors and families in every state across this country. Needs to be preserved, it needs security, and it needs to be protected. And that is in resident ownership. As a rock, we now govern ourselves democratically. An example is we would only ever raise the rent when it was absolutely necessary, voted on and approved by all members of the corporation. Never would a co-op raise the rent for profit. My community is 600 people in 430 homes, and I think I can speak for all of them that we are grateful for the OTP laws in Massachusetts.
Thank you very much. All right, questions. We have a question from Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How different is this bill than HB 71 that passed 114-21 last year?
First, let me just take the opportunity to thank the House Speaker for allowing us to have virtual testimony so we can get exposed to great regional dialects like this. But to answer your question, it's extremely similar. It's not in exactly the right form, especially once we tweak some of the amendments that I think are coming in from stakeholders, but it will be substantially similar to the bill that the House passed overwhelmingly last year in a bipartisan fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for this bill. We're looking forward to working with you again on this. Per DHCH's letter, is there another department that can do the work that they say that they are not capable
Yeah, this is a
of
great question. So if y'all haven't had a chance to read DHCD's letter of information, they basically, we had a part of the bill that essentially required notice to go out to DHCD from the community owner when this was sold. This was basically meant to allow, to give the agency an opportunity to help the residents purchase the community if that was the direction they wanted to go in. DHCD basically said, it's going to be kind of tough for us to be able to work to receive the notice and help out in any way. So certainly sensitive to their concerns. I'm not sure if there is going to be another public entity that can serve that role. Possibly some of the like county and municipal housing agencies could sort of take this notice and then potentially help direct the residents to a nonprofit. But you know, I'm sensitive to DHCD's concern, and if they don't think that they can take on this role, then I'd be happy to remove that.
Yeah, but I think my biggest concern is this is a very good bill. I'd be interested in us trying to find out who could.
Me too.
So I'm happy to work with you on that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No further questions, so we will go to two people who are signed up. They're in person, favorable with amendments, Camille Fesh and Ryan Hotchkiss. So if you could come up and take it away. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barvey, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. It's wonderful to be here in person. My name is Camille Fesh. I'm here on behalf of Horizon Land Co., and I have the founder and CEO of Horizon, Ryan Hotchkiss, with me. We are here favorable with amendments on House Bill 23. We want to thank Delegate Stewart for the opportunity to work with him. Last year we worked with him on this bill. We're working with him again on this bill. And we appreciate the opportunity to put in amendments, which I believe will be seen in subcommittee. Our goal here is to protect residents of manufactured housing communities and to protect the longevity and the ability to survive of those manufactured housing communities. Our amendments are a purpose to guard against land use change and bad actors who are coming in, as Delegate Stewart said, to jack up the rent and other things. And we want to protect the Marylanders who live in some of the only affordable housing in Maryland that is not subsidized. The crux of what we're putting in is that, to echo what Delegate Stewart said, is that in the event that one of these communities is sold, we want protection for the residents, and we want to protect the community against redevelopment and protect opportunist buyers. Therefore, when a property is sold, the buyer or the acquirer of the property would then have to put in an affidavit in the land records that they would maintain the community as remain the community as a community without change in land use for a minimum of 5 years, and they would not be permitted to raise the rent on the homeowners in excess of 10% for 3 years. That is the crux of it. There are some other provisions we put in that want to point out that it was looking at the statutes, we wanted to make sure that to protect residents in the event of a land use change or that a park is being shut down, we wanted to make sure that the statute reached even smaller communities, dropping the rate of the number of lots from 38 to 10, and making sure that we increase the amount of relocation assistance given to homeowners from 10 months to 12 months. So we thank you very much. We look forward to working with Delegate Stewart, and we are favorable with amendments.
We look forward to you helping us with the JPR committee also. I couldn't resist, I'm sorry. Okay, Ryan Hotchkiss.
Yes, hi, Ryan Hotchkiss. I am born and raised in Rockville, Maryland, married a woman from Baltimore, Maryland. We've raised our 3 kids in Bethesda. I'm a member of the Maryland Bar, started my company, Horizon Land Co. in Crofton, Maryland. We employ 65 people in the state of Maryland. We have been around, this whole company, all we've done since we've been, I'm nervous, excuse me. Since 2006, all we've done is own and operate manufactured housing communities. We have 174 across 20 states in the United States, including 12 in Maryland, including the one in Montgomery County. We bought it from a fellow named Dr. Singh who was looking to redevelop it because it's a higher and better use. And I live in Montgomery County, and gosh darn it if I wasn't going to make sure that it stayed a mobile home park. We are committed to preserving manufactured housing as affordable housing and the country's best home ownership, unsubsidized home ownership option. As a result, we are committed to preserving manufactured housing as manufactured housing, to making sure that our communities remain affordable to our residents and that our communities are pleasant, safe, well-run, maintained, and that the residents get quality for their rent. We actually proposed these amendments, okay? These were extra additional protections that we proposed talking to Delegate Stewart. It became clear that the 2 evils we're really trying to get at here is the closure of a community and bad actors who come in and jack up rent. Obviously, we're taking from what we've seen in New Jersey and New York, who have required 5 years. The 3-year limit was to keep bad actors out of our states. I don't want them in here. When these bad actors come and they jack rents up on people, they look at good owners like us and they accuse us of being bad people as well. I want these people out of Maryland, and anybody that has to come in and underwrite a deal by jacking rent up on the residents and making their situation unaffordable are people we do not want in the state of Maryland. So for that reason, I fully support these amendments and the statute as amended.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? There appear to be no questions for you, so thank you very, very much. We do have 2 virtual witnesses who are representing ROC USA Capital, Michael Sloss and Mary O'Hara, who are testifying informationally. So if you are with us, you have 2 minutes each. If you're not with us, then, oh, here we go, Mary O'Hara, okay. Welcome, Mary, to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mary O'Hara. I am the Executive Vice President with ROC USA, Resident Owned Communities USA. We are a nonprofit social venture whose mission is to make quality resident ownership viable for homeowners living in manufactured home communities across the nation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify about HB 23. The way we look at it, HB 23 provides homeowners in Maryland an opportunity to purchase the community they live in, to secure their right to remain on the land, and to build equity in the home they own. ROC USA has seen how similar state statutes have helped to create 304 resident-owned communities that are home to almost 22,000 households across the country. Today, there are resident-owned communities in 21 states, and generally we're adding between 17 and 25 new resident-owned communities per year. For delegates who are concerned about the success of resident ownership, I can testify that after nearly 40 years of this work taking place, no resident-owned community has ever been foreclosed on or resold to commercial ownership. In states with opportunity to purchase laws, the purchase process runs very smoothly. ROCs are purchasing their communities well within commercial real estate timeframes, 90 to 120 days. Across ROC USA, 98% of purchase contracts close as agreed upon. And the last time I did the math, on average, we were at about 89 days of closing after signing a purchase contract. Most sellers testify to the efficiency of the process. We've got satisfaction testimonials on our website. Please go and take a look. Keeping ownership local and getting the same price as they would have got from any other buyer. As Carolyn indicated, the benefits of resident ownership are deep, and I would be happy to go on and answer any questions and provide further information. So please, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Is Michael Sloss with us?
Michael Sloss had to go. He put in the chat that he had a 4 o'clock appointment and was unable to attend. So he's not available. I apologize. I could do his testimony if you like.
No, that's quite all right. Let's see if there are any questions. No, there aren't. You did a wonderful job, so there are no questions. There's nobody signed up in opposition, so that ends the public hearing for House Bill 23. Thank you, one and all. Let's proceed to House Bill 98, Delegate Arentz, whose staff is here. So, you put the interns' names here. Hold it. Okay, so James Parkinson, and so Mr. Parkinson, welcome to the committee. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is James Parkinson. I'm an intern for Delegate Arentz. He regrets being able to introduce this bill. I'm pleased to introduce House Bill 98, which will make a small but important change to insurance coverage requirements under Maryland condominium law that will help provide additional housing choice for Maryland residents. Lisa May and Kevin Waterman with the Realtors can discuss in greater detail the legislation as well as a cottage cluster type development which Mr. Waterman helped build on the Eastern Shore. May I first introduce Ms. Lisa May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors. This bill involves a technical change to state code language on the type of insurance that condominium developments must carry. As housing types have evolved to include both attached and detached condominiums, our code language needs to evolve with it. It hasn't, and that's why we're here today. House Bill 98 would very simply say that a detached condominium unit has to carry insurance that is similar to what a detached unit in a homeowners association would carry. And that's because detached condominium units don't share walls, roofs, hallways, elevators, electrical and mechanical systems the same way that an attached condominium does. This bill recognizes the differences that exist between those two developments and provides insurance coverage that reflects those differences. We also want to emphasize what this bill does not do. This bill does not require any county, city, or municipality to develop condominiums in this way. It does nothing to increase the density of any developments that are pending there, and it does nothing to change local zoning. This legislation only kicks in once a county or city or town has agreed that this is a type of housing that they need, that is a type of housing that they are missing, and they have gone through all of their normal approval process to allow this type of housing. That is when this bill comes into play. Queen Anne's County is one of those areas that currently allows detached condominiums within their boundaries, and one of our Maryland Realtor members, Kevin Waterman, has developed one of those communities. So I will hand that over to him to discuss the on-the-ground reasons for seeking this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, I guess we'll hear from Kevin Waterman, correct?
That is correct, sir. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, thank you for your time. My name is Kevin Waterman. I live in Denton, Maryland, and work with Coldwell Banker Waterman Realty, which is a family-owned brokerage located on Kent Island. In addition to real estate brokerage, we do engage in small-scale local development, and one of those projects was a small community called Coles Crossing, in which we took a property and were able to create an additional 8 lots that were structured as detached condominium units. As a result of the way Maryland law is structured, we had to set those up with a master insurance policy, same as townhome community, an apartment building, condominium apartments, any other condo in Maryland. The end result of that is that the homes were every unit was insured through that master insurance policy. Overall, that works great for traditional condominiums. However, in the case of our project, I'm pretty sure every single person who came and looked at it, and certainly anyone who came far enough to purchase one, there was a somewhat confusing explanation to them about why are basically is the condo fee seems so high for a community that doesn't have any amenities. And we had to explain the fee is high because your home insurance is tied into that. That everyone who looked at that assumed, well, it's a detached home, it must have, I just get my own homeowner's insurance. And they were factoring that price cost into their decision making. Obviously, we have no idea how many people looked at these, saw the condo fee, and never even looked to realize, well, your insurance cost is going to be commensurately lower. And as a result, never even looked at what might have been a great option for them. We certainly would like to continue to do more cottage cluster type communities, and as we search to try and help solve the problem of the missing middle housing that we severely lack here in Maryland. However, this is definitely it's not the only barrier, but it is a notable one, and it doesn't do us any good to create affordable missing middle housing. It's if no one knows that it is in fact as affordable as it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have a number of questions. And I believe that's everybody. Yeah, everybody who's testifying here. First question goes to Delegate Healy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask does this kind of insurance actually exist in Maryland?
I'm not aware of any reason it would not. Also, I believe do you know if testimony was submitted from the Homeowners Association group on that, Lisa?
The only amendment that was asked for this bill last time from the Community Associations Institute was just making sure that the declarations were very clear as to what was and was not covered under the master policy. We believe that this incorporates all of their concerns.
But you're
and we did not. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a simple yes or no question. You're changing the requirement for the insurance to a different kind of policy. Does that policy exist as something that people can get in Maryland now?
Yes, it would be very similar to, for instance, a single-family neighborhood that exists under an HOA. You have the master policy that covers the common areas.
So the answer is yes.
And then yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For anyone on the panel, this is a little confusion on my part. So I'm certainly not a real estate expert. And so that's why I'm asking this question. Can you tell me what the difference between these detached condominium communities is versus like a homeowners association? Because I always think of a condominium as being in one building or being attached to one another. So I just want to know what the difference is. Like what kind of dwellings are you talking about?
And actually we submitted some visual kind of aids along with our written testimony that very much helped me understand this. So practically speaking, there isn't much of a difference between an HOA and a detached condominium, except for the fact that some counties have required these to be developed under a condominium structure as opposed to under an HOA structure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, I think, for Mr. Waterman. You mentioned how a lot of times the cost of these policies ends up getting passed down to the buyers or the residents. Should this change take place, is there any way we can guarantee that savings gets passed down as well to the residents?
I believe that ultimately your prices should be very comparable, that most cottage cluster communities are very small. Coles Crossing was basically 9 units, the 8 cottage home units plus an existing farmhouse from before. At least as far as the Queen Anne's County ordinance is concerned, the cottage home cluster communities are capped at, I believe, no more than 12 units.
Okay.
These are small enough communities that there aren't going to be any meaningful bulk savings from there, so the prices should be comparable.
Thank you.
There be no further questions for the sponsor or the witnesses, so I believe that ends the public hearing on House Bill 98. Thank you very much. Let's proceed to House Bill 101, Delegate Charkoudian. I don't see, oh, there you are. I didn't see you out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I bring up my panel?
Yes, please do.
And I have one virtual.
Yep, she's queued up.
Nice. Yeah, please. Here it comes.
4 minutes.
Thank you. Chair Barve and Vice Chair Stein and colleagues. It's a thrill to be here. Welcome back and welcome to folks who just recently came onto the committee. For the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian here asking for a favorable report on House Bill 101. And so what this bill does is it essentially makes it easier for condominiums to purchase solar and other clean energy equipment for their common areas. So essentially the thought process behind this is we are in a climate emergency, as you all know, and so it's incumbent upon us to remove as many barriers as we can remove from our legacy of whatever has happened that's created those barriers in order to make sure that we can deploy clean energy as quickly as possible everywhere across the state. I think you also are aware of some of the challenges in terms of where do we put the solar. I know those are conversations that come in front of you all the time, and putting solar on rooftops and other built environment is essentially the least controversial of those conversations. And so when we have built environment and rooftops to put the solar on, we shouldn't allow other needless barriers to sort of get in the way of doing that. And so what's happened is because of portions of the Condominium Act that have been built over time for other issues, these portions of the act have gotten in the way of condominiums being able to move forward with solar and other clean energy projects. This issue was brought to me by some folks who work with Montgomery County solar associations, condo associations, to try to build more solar, and they'll be able to describe in more detail essentially solar that was not installed because of these barriers. And then our friend on the joining us virtually will describe a lot of time and money wasted in order to get solar installed. And it's my hope that as you hear this, you'll agree that we need to make these adjustments. And this should be really low. Installing solar in these places should really be the low-hanging fruit. And so we should get this done and then move on to some of the more complicated areas that I know this committee is also working on, and I thank you for all the work that you do on that.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Tom Deo with the Montgomery County Green Bank. Tom, are you up there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. I am Tom Deo, CEO of the Montgomery County Green Bank. Montgomery County Green Bank is a county chartered entity that operates as an independent 501c3 nonprofit that uses capital provided by the county and others to partner with the private sector to create more financing for clean energy projects. To date, we have supported over $30 million of projects, including 3.5 million megawatts of solar, and most recently a 2.1 megawatt solar project at Seneca Village near Gaithersburg. But none of the work we have done to date has been with condominiums, yet the county has over 200 condominium properties with housing 42,000 homeowners. Yet, we have been engaged with these condominiums in Montgomery County in the last 3 years to support installations as leasehold activities. We've worked with the condo boards and the professional solar developers to develop the designs that must meet local code and to provide favorable not out-of-pocket funding options to make these projects work as leasehold projects. These projects have been reviewed by the condo boards and reached the place of decision-making. However, these projects have been stalled because the boards have faced the current law's approval requirements for such projects that include a greater than 60% level of approval by both the mortgage owners and mortgage holders for the leasehold improvements. In particular, these volunteer boards must find dozens of names and addresses of all the mortgage holders and then send a certified notice to each and await responses. This is beyond their capacity, and no board wants to move ahead with the risk of not meeting the current law. This bill addresses the key obstacle for delivering solar on condos, changing the approval requirements for the specific owner and mortgage holders, including lifting the financial and logistical burden for the boards to reach all of the mortgage holders. Through the bill, the condo boards can be allowed to proceed in a dutiful fashion to approve the installation of these leasehold equipment in a similar structured, efficient, and cost-effective way as to how these boards currently approve installation for other leasehold, utility, and communication activities. This work will bring more condominiums in the state able to do this, generating savings to homeowners, creating jobs, and reducing the energy consumption. Montgomery County Green Bank urges support of this bill. Thank you.
Oh, great. Who'd like to testify next?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me. I'm Seth Yazel. I'm an electric regulatory attorney at the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'd just like to mention all of my views are my own and not that of the government or the commission. I'm speaking to you as a resident of Chevy Chase Crest, a condominium community located in Montgomery County at DC's North Boundary Stone, and as a supporter of House Bill 101. Our community has been working for over 2 years to install what will eventually be an approximately 1 megawatt rooftop solar facility set to provide income for our community account and utility bill relief for our fellow neighbors. This journey has lasted 2 years thus far, primarily because at the 11th hour, our condominium attorney informed us that in order to enter into a solar leasing agreement with any of the local developers, the Maryland Condominium Act requires us to gain 66 2/3 approval from all condominium co-owners and each of their mortgagees. This is a problem for 2 reasons. First, because we only have about a 50% owner occupancy rate for our 80 homes and see single-digit turnout for our board meetings every month. And second, because we do not have the resources to reach out to and convince upwards of 40 different banks not to oppose our project. We are coming before you seeking that this law be amended because we have seen tremendous support from all of our neighbors who have weighed in on this issue and want to make sure that other communities can avoid this barrier in accessing affordable energy. As we push to achieve our state's clean energy future, it is paramount that we stamp out any and all red tape blocking citizens from participating. Amending the Maryland Condominium Act in accordance with House Bill 101 represents a meaningful step toward that goal, so I urge this body to issue a favorable report on House Bill 101. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Landon Farrig here? Oh, yep, there you are. With the MEA, Maryland Energy Administration.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, members. My name is Landon Farrig. I'm the Legislative Liaison for the Maryland Energy Administration. You have my written testimony, so I'll be brief. We would just like to echo what's already been said. This approach is the same approach that Maryland has used to open up the door for solar and multi-unit housing developments. It's also the same tack that was taken for the right to charge and allowing chargers in to enter multi-unit developments. The bill has very little risk, very little downside, and very little burdens attached to it. For those reasons, we urge a favorable report.
Okay. Let's go to Joelle, who's with us virtually. Joelle, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Joelle Novi. I live at Eastern Village Co-Housing in Silver Spring. And right now, we did find our way to a happy ending eventually. The eastern portion of our roof is being replaced in preparation for a 216 panel solar project that will generate most of the electricity we use for our common spaces of our building. But it nearly wasn't so. Tom Deo testified to the bigger picture, how many condominium solar projects, and you just heard about one, have been delayed or killed by the current requirements of the Maryland Condo Act. I want to tell a personal story about what it was like to have my community solar project almost derailed by the current law. I served on Eastern Village Solar Committee, and we originally formed in the fall of 2021. We solicited proposals for power purchase agreements through which solar developers would put up solar on our roof at no cost to us and sell us the power for less than we were paying for power from the grid. Our co-housing building operates by consensus decision-making. So we also undertook the labor of love of educating all 55 households about how solar financing works, reassuring our neighbors that We wouldn't compromise their enjoyment of the rest of the roof. It took, 5 months and hundreds of conversations to come to consensus to appoint a task force to recommend a developer to the board. We were in the midst of selecting a developer when our friends at the Montgomery County Green Bank brought to our attention the requirements of the Maryland Condo Act. It raised the possibility that the board wouldn't have the authority to sign the power purchase agreement themselves. In order to sign a power purchase agreement with our chosen solar developer, we might need every residential owner and every mortgage holder of every unit in our building to be notified of the proposed contract, and then we would need 2/3 to affirmatively approve it. Even for our fearless and motivated volunteer committee, this prospect was pretty devastating. The day I learned about it, I remember feeling my heart sink. We ultimately were able to proceed, but figuring out how to notify these mortgage holders in writing, securing 2/3 affirmative approval would have been a bear.
If you could begin to wrap up.
Program project.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to recognize favorable with amendments Bob Anton, and then we'll go to any questions for everybody who's signed up in favor in some fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Robert Enton, testifying on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. And I guess the point I'd like to make is that, I've represented, I think as many of you know, the banking industry in the state of Maryland for decades. And this is the first time that anything has been introduced regarding the mortgagee language in the current statute. In addition, I've never, ever had any legislator come to me and raise it as an issue, say it was problematic. You also know I represent the Maryland Building Industry Association. We come in on the condominium bills all the time. I'll be here for Delegate Holmes's bills today to deal with that. I've never heard it raised at all. So we're kind of taken aback by the language that removes, if you look on page 2 of the bill, the language in lines 19 through 28, which takes out the ability of the requirement that if I'm a condominium unit owner and there's a mortgage on my property, and we're going to have any kind of easement, right-of-way, lease in excess of a year, or similar interest affecting the common elements, that has a standard in it that's always been there that says that the mortgage holder for that condominium unit owner who votes in favor of it have to consent to it. And you might ask, well, why is that? Why should they have to consent? They have to. If you're buying a $300,000 condominium unit, and maybe you're getting a $60,000 mortgage, so $60,000, you're putting down a $60,000 down payment, and you're financing $240,000. I guess the question becomes, who has a bigger interest in the unit, the owner or the lender? And even if you're 5 or 10 years down the road, you're probably still going to owe $200,000 on it. And I'll wrap up, Mr. Chairman. I did talk with the sponsor of the bill the other day. I raised the concern also about the broadness of, if you look on page 4 in lines 13 to 15, with the definition of clean energy equipment is very, very broad. I don't know, is it going to cost $1 million? Is it going to cost $50,000? Who knows? So I will hope this bill, will be discussed in Delegate Holmes' subcommittee. I'd like to try to work something out on it if I could, but just looking at it in the eyes of a mortgage holder, we have a huge stake in this, and the legislature has recognized this, and this would change it.
Well, Bob, if I had known you weren't quite as friendly as I expected, I would have called you up separately and not had you sit next to the sponsor here, but...
I would like to see if we couldn't work something out, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
well, that's exactly what I like to hear. The Vice Chair has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess, well, Delegate first, thank you for bringing this bill. And I guess my question is for Mr. Enton. I understand you're saying that the removal of mortgagee approval is somewhat unique under the bill for the Condo Act. But is there any other situation where the requirement of mortgagee approval has been an impediment in the same way that it seems like it's been for solar projects?
Not that I'm aware of, Doug Stein, but, you know, I think that when you look at this, you know, I'm just not sure. You know, I've looked at it. I wasn't sure about it. It's been on the books for a long time. I've never been aware that it's ever been a problem in anything that a condominium association wants to do. But this completely eliminates the banks, and under the amendments, we don't even get notice of it under the language in the bill. You're changing the percentage, so if you have 100 units and 51% of them, 51 say it's okay and 49 say it's not, well, it still goes through. You know, 2/3 has always been the standard for these types of things. I mean, you know, all throughout this, you look page after page of the current law, that if there's going to be a vote, you know, if they're going to grant easements, rights of ways, licenses, leases in excess of 1 year, at a minimum, the mortgagee gets notice. For this provision, you don't even get notice, and the mortgagee has a chance to be heard. And there are no limits, you know, there are no dollar limits or anything in it, and it makes me concerned that we're being complete. While we have a voice and notice for anything else, we don't get it here. And what's interesting is that the section these sections that are being amended, for the most part, deal with the board of directors, not the unit owners. You know, it's the board of directors. And most of the code deals with notice, you know, with what the board of directors can do under the declaration of bylaws, or if the declaration of bylaws say the board of directors can do it. And then you have to have you know, but once again, regardless, the mortgagee, under existing law, throughout the entire rest of this, and this is what, a 7-page bill, at least you get notice of it. Here you get no notice at all.
If I could follow up, so if notice was provided, would that remove your objections?
That would make me feel much better about it. The other thing that I might suggest, once again I have to talk to, is maybe a more refined definition of clean energy products, and so we have a better idea of what's involved. How does it, I'm not sure what the rights of way and easements are. Maybe somebody could explain this, that go with putting solar panels on the roof of a condominium building. When I think of easements and rights of way, I'm thinking of a roadway that goes through a piece of property. And of course, you know, when a title company does that title search, if you're going to, you know, buy the property, right, and you've applied for a mortgage, and the title company's going to go ahead and do a title search, when they go up to the land records and look at the land records, any easements and rights of ways are going to be recorded there in the deed, and that way the buyer gets notice, as does the mortgage lender. Are there easements? Are there right of ways? And 99.9% of the time, nobody cares. But at least you do get notice of it. So it just seems to me that this is a significant change in the process. But one of the things that occurs to me is maybe rather than, you know, if you saying that we have to vote for this, maybe we get a notice, and if we don't object to it, then that's, you know, then we've, you know, deemed to have consented. I'm just trying to come up with something that makes sure that the rights of the party that has the biggest financial stake in the property has at least notice and maybe somewhat of a say in this. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, if that's your favorable with amendments, I'm going to rethink having you favorable on my bills, my friend. Oh, my goodness.
It would be my pleasure, Delegate Love.
Anyway, Delegate Charkoudian, can you clarify some of the things that Mr. Enton brought up? Because I'm now confused.
Well, thank you. Yeah, let me give it a shot, because I'm confused about the favorable with amendment as well, but I appreciate the spirit of the favorable part of it. It's good to be on a panel with both of us being favorable, Bob. Yeah, so I think that, but Bob's point that I think is well taken in his last comment is when he thinks about easements, he thinks about roads, and I think that that's exactly the point, is that this was written at a time that nobody was imagining putting solar on rooftops. And so it was written for road easements and, like a level of disruption to an area or a change to the physical infrastructure of a condo association's joint property that was very different from what we're imagining now with rooftop solar. And so that is exactly why it's important to change this now for both a very different set of technologies, but also for a different set of emergency that we're facing sort of as a planet. Having said that, though, I think Tom may be able to answer specifically, like, what does an easement look like in the context of this is, and also that this is a lease, so you're not actually doing anything to the ownership of an individual unit, which is what the mortgage holder has a interest in. A sort of stake ownership of. But you're actually, it's the common areas that we're talking about, and I guess if you're okay to talk about lease and what we're talking about in terms of the technicalities, that might be helpful as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. So just structurally, what you have to think about is you've got a solar developer who's going to come in and install solar on the roof of the condominium. They're doing it with no cost to the condominium. All the financing is brought to the condominium. The maintenance is going to be maintained by that developer, and all that's entered into is a contract between that developer and the condominium to sell the power generated by that solar to the condominium association at a price less than they would pay the utility company. So there's a benefit to the condominium by virtue of the fact that the solar on their property is costing them less per kilowatt hour than what they would have bought it from the grid. The only thing that is between the solar developer and the condominium is a lease of the roof in order for them to install the solar. It's the same as any utility might be installing something on the condominium in order to provide that utility's benefit to the condominium. So there is no monetary output from the condominium for this. There's simply a contractual relationship. The solar developer takes all the risk in the transaction, all the maintenance in it, and all they're looking for is a lease to be conducted between the condominium association and the solar developer. It still looks to follow the same board approval process as any lease would be. The public notice that the board would do for a meeting would be done. I think the burden here is that the notice that's required in this is a direct notice to every one of the mortgage holders, certified notice that they've gotten it, and managing that and the long-term nature of that notice, and trying to find each of those mortgage holders for maybe the tens to hundreds that are in those properties is a very significant burden. When they can do it through their own normal board approval process, which has a public approval, has a board association approval associated, and has its own notice that meeting is taking place. So all that's being asked for here is an approval ability, a simpler ability to approve that simple lease arrangement between the association and the solar developer to install that solar project.
Before I recognize Delegate Healy, Delegate Charkoudian, how about the notice? Are we in agreement that the lender should be notified?
I think that the question becomes, and this was what we heard from Ms. Novi, is the question becomes what the cost is. If you're doing certified, you're tracking all that information, you're doing certified letters or response. I mean, I'm open to thinking about how notification could happen, but if you imagine how cumbersome that could be to be doing notice to, I mean, in some cases, I don't know, 150, 200 different banks that might hold on a larger condo, on a larger condominium. I mean, you could have hundreds of different banks. I mean, you would have a lot of people who would have the same bank, I assume, but like if you picture what that takes for a volunteer association who's trying to put solar on their roof, it kind of feels like it's out of consistency with what we're trying to make happen. I'm open to thinking about it. I don't feel like I could commit to it right now because it does feel like that could be burdensome.
Okay, well, let me go to Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate, for this bill. I think it's very interesting, and I do think the ultimate goal is great. I have a couple questions. because a lot of these boards that are going to be making these decisions are, as you said, volunteers, and they may not have a lot of expertise. And entering into a contract like this, there are potentially some problems that if it's an older building, the engineering may not be able to support the weight of the solar panels, or, I mean, there's some things that, just so that there's protection for the people who are going to be living under these when they're put on their building. And I just wonder if there's any kind of way to get some protection built into whatever this contract would be to make this available as something that we really want to have done, but still, we don't want it to be something that in 10 or 20 years is going to weaken the supports of the building.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that the leases, the solar is owned by the solar company, so they have inherent, even separate from whatever is in the contract, they have an inherent interest in not having their panels fall through the roof, right? I mean, so they're not going to be putting it on a unsafe structure that can't handle it. But I think do you want to talk about what's in the contract?
Well, beyond the contract, the development itself has to be approved by the local permitting office, and that's exactly what they look for. Is the roof capable of holding the weight? They have to provide detailed engineering studies, and so the solar cannot be installed unless it passes the local code and the local permitting, and that's exactly what they're looking for. And we've had projects that have to go back and have a different type of ballast put on them in order to manage that load on the roof. So that is part of the process and what has to be approved before it's even installed.
It's not just the load on the roof, though. It's the load on the walls. If you get cracks all the way down the side of the building or into the foundation, where the stresses are. I'm not an engineer, but I live in a house that's almost 100 years old. I think that there are condos that are old and that don't have that weren't built to support that kind of weight. That's just the question I have.
So that is what the local permitting is looking for as well. It's looking to make sure that this project can be withheld on the property itself, roof being the most important aspect of that.
Obviously. And the other question I had, just briefly, was I've seen some articles recently that a really good place to put solar panels is on over parking structure, like a car park kind of thing, where in Florida, a lot of because of the heat in the day, there's a lot of roofs over where you park your car. Not so much around here, we just have open parking lots, but is that something that would also be covered by this? If you wanted to build a structure over the parking, that would just be a place to put the panels?
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you were a condo association and you wanted to put solar over where the cars are parked right now, you would still have to go through whatever this is. If you were doing this lease arrangement, that would be the common area. So this would be the same process.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, the board would still have the fiduciary obligation to do their due diligence on this. Is that right?
There's nothing amended out of this from what a board's due diligence is. That's correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. And the other thing is, and I thought I read this, but I'm just going back to look for it and I haven't found it. This would also apply if the community wanted to put in EV charging stations under a lease arrangement. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, there appear to be no further questions. We will go to the opponent of the bill, Dana Schultz. Dana, welcome back. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for having me. I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran and a Millersville resident. I have a bachelor's degree in public affairs and a master's degree. Maryland hosts an abundant amount of affordable and clean energy within our borders. Marylanders desire balanced energy policies that provide citizens multiple, reliable, and affordable energy choices. We are not in a climate emergency. The barriers to energy production and consumption have been put in place by regulators. HB 101 gives condos the authority to put solar and other devices onto roofs. The broad language may provide that other devices or utilities could be any devices such as 5G equipment or other equipment not tested to its long-term effects upon citizens. Time, resources, and money is being wasted on these inefficient sources of power when the low-hanging fruit is easily available from other sources such as clean, efficient, effective natural gas. I oppose HB 101 and the push for Marylanders to follow the energy policies of the United Nations and Agenda 2030.
Appear to be no questions for this witness. Thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on that bill. We will go to Delegate Holmes, who every interim crawls into his real property man cave and comes up with bills. Each one is more obscure than the last. So we will begin, Delegate Holmes, with House Bill 29.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for that wonderful introduction. And, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marvin Holmes, and I'll be here all week. Let me start out by saying that I am been with this committee for a very, very long time, and most of the issues relevant to housing fall upon my shoulders, and I'm very, very happy to participate in that arena. You have before you HB 29. This is the bill relevant to Bill of Rights. Now, you may be wondering how I came to present this bill, how I came to put this forward. This bill was first a part of a discussion, ladies and gentlemen, by a task force on common ownership communities in 2005, okay? The task force in 2005 released its final findings back in 2006. And after 2006, when the final findings were released, nothing took place relevant to the Bill of Rights. Last year, I put forward, or attempted to put forward, a task force bill, but because of the election cycle, we did not move forward with any task force bill. However, I did have a task force, unofficial task force on my own, and we met for about a year. And in that unofficial task force, we had a large participation, and actually had 5 separate subcommittees within this task force bill. The Bill of Rights is something that's been around for quite a while. I'm going to read part of what the 2006 final report is. The 2006 strongly suggested that we have a Bill of Rights. And it says here, adoption of Homeowners' Bill of Rights. Consideration of the adoption of Homeowners' Bill of Rights should be deferred depending upon consideration by some other groups. And those other groups are national groups. They did, in fact, have their final findings in 2008, and some others are going to come on board and talk about that as well. You also notice in the 2006 final report, it says, the task force heard testimony in favor of passage of Homeowners' Bill of Rights to protect common ownership community unit owners from laws which unfairly favor governing boards and or management agents. You'll be interested to know that all of the opposition to this HB 29 comes from the management agents. And you'll hear from them later on. The task force, a homeowners task force bill, is something that has been looked at for a very, very long time. And I want to I got 48 seconds left. I'll tell you what, Mr. Chair, you're going to hear a lot of information relevant to this from others, and I'm going to cut my testimony short right now because the rest of the questions are going to be answered by those that are here.
Okay, well, we have signed up favorable Nelda Fink, who is virtual. So, Nelda, if you are with us, now's your chance. Oh, I see a Nelda. There she is. Nelda, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me here. I am, in fact, my name is Nelda Fink, for the record, and I'm the treasurer of my community's condo association, and I am in favor of this bill. This Bill of Rights is very necessary, as many associations, board members do not know the rights of council members, and they overstep those rights all the time. The boards don't understand the limiting powers they are given in the governing documents and abuse their supposed authority far too much, costing the homeowner much financial distress. I'm appalled at all the violations my board commits, but I am only one vote and I am limited in what I can do for my community. Having a Bill of Rights would be beneficial and would allow the owners to have something tangible to point to against the board and provide some necessary recourse for the owner. Even though the Bill of Rights of the Maryland Constitution covers much of this, homeowners and most citizens don't know how to apply it. Plus, the owners have no recourse because our judicial system and our criminal system will not accept a complaint that doesn't have standing, that doesn't have some kind of physical or financial loss. And for those homeowners who may experience that financial loss as a result of aggressive and unauthorized actions by the board, having a Bill of Rights will allow action to be taken against the board before that financial loss would be realized. In many cases, because the board members do not understand their limitations and their fiduciary responsibility, they rely on the management company agent's advice. The agent, in many cases, can influence the board to take actions against a unit owner when ulterior motives may be in play, and then it becomes like a witch hunt on the owner. I believe this is occurring in my own community. If the boards had more education on their limited fiduciary authority, they would not need to place so much reliance on the underhanded profit incentivized agents, and this would not be happening. Having a Bill of Rights is the first step in educating the owners so that they can hold their boards and their agents accountable. So I'm in favor of this bill.
Okay, lest I not make the mistake of the previous bill, I'm now going to take questions for those who are purely in favor of Delegate Holmes's bill. Nobody? Okay. Oh, wait. Okay, there you go.
Flying the ointment, Mr. Chairman, sorry. Delegate, thank you for bringing this bill. I haven't read it in its entirety, but I guess looking at it, a key provision is that the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's Office is empowered to accept complaints from owners and investigate them and take action. Is that right?
That is correct. And you're going to hear from the Attorney General's office coming up later on. I might also add that those persons that are in opposition to this particular bill, their own national organization has put out a statement on their national website, Rights and Responsibilities for Better Communities. They indicate themselves that a Bill of Rights is a very important piece of common ownership community living. So even their national websites put out how important a Bill of Rights is, even though they seem to be in opposition of it today.
Actually, I think the opponent's organization is the United States Air Force, for whom she was a combat veteran. But, okay.
Thank you.
So let's, we have
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, I just had one point of clarification. There's the section here where it's talking about the right to vote. It talks about elections being administered by neutral parties. What does that mean there, the neutral parties? Who would that be? Sometimes when, I'm on HOA, when we go there, it's the HOA themselves kind of, holding that vote. What does that mean?
I see what you're saying. You're talking about who holds the election process.
Yes, sir.
Typically, when we have votes for boards of directors, et cetera, particularly with large HOAs or condos or common ownership communities, we employ sometimes those third parties which are data-driven. And for example, how it works is every person that's going to vote will be assigned a number. And then once they vote, they will be, their number will be recorded in terms of who they voted for, so that their vote does not have a particular person's name. So it's a secret ballot.
Sure.
A secret ballot vote.
Yeah.
Now a lot of communities do not always utilize that facility. A lot of communities use the old-fashioned paper ballot with their proxies, et cetera, and the votes are put into a box, so to speak, and there's always a third party that oversees how the voting process takes place. HOAs from across the state sometimes call me to be the third party to oversee the voting process, just to make sure that it's going properly.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate. That clarifies that for me.
Sure.
All righty, so let's go to those who are favorable with amendments. First, Bob Etten, followed by Lori Graff, and then Karen Strawn, and then we have two other people who are virtually testifying favorable with amendments.
Did you sign up?
Yes. Did I miss somebody?
Yes.
Oh. Oh, yes, well, you're signed up favorable with amendments, so yeah, you'll be coming up next. But let's take Bob Etten. My mistake.
Mr. Enton.
Delegate Holmes. Once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Anton on behalf on this bill, the Maryland Building Industry Association. And we are signed up favorable with amendments, Mr. Chairman. You have our written testimony, and I don't think we have a problem with there being a Bill of Rights. I think the problem with the bill as drafted, and as we point out in our written testimony, is that there are just a number of provisions in here that really don't recognize how the Maryland condominium laws are in Maryland. And maybe that's because this comes from a national organization and they're not familiar with the laws. But I'll just give you perhaps an example. If you look, for instance, on page 3 in lines 13 through 16 of the bill, it says that the owner has a right to be represented by the governing body of the common ownership community. But it doesn't say in what capacity and in what regard. Represented where? Represented in court, represented in the legislature. I mean, I think it's one of these terms in here that just needs to be clarified and is unclear. And there are, if you look at our written testimony, and I know this will go to Delegate Holmes' subcommittee, those are the kinds of issues that we raise. Page 4, lines 3 through 7 have 3 through 7 talk about the right to fair treatment. I'm not quite sure, what that means. These terms of art in here, the right to a reasonable opportunity to speak during a timely period. What does a timely period mean? So I think that we can work all these issues out with Delegate Holmes, but those are the kinds of concerns that we have, and they're all stated pretty precisely in our written testimony. And if we can address these issues, we'll have no problem whatsoever with the bill.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Next is Lori Graff here. I guess don't see her. Karen Strawn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Karen Strawn, and I'm with the Office of the Attorney General, Consumer Protection Division. We are generally in support of a Bill of Rights for people who live in common ownership communities. The things that are described here are things that we currently deal with largely, and we take complaints when people who live in common ownership communities have problems with their governing board or their property manager. And we take complaints and try to resolve them and work with the consumer and the association to try and resolve those problems. The concern that we have is the language that's included on the last page of the bill, which talks about the Consumer Protection Division taking direct enforcement actions on behalf of a residential owner. It's just something that we don't do at this point. We don't take direct actions on behalf of particular individuals. We don't represent individuals. We represent the citizens of Maryland. So we can take an action as a body for the citizens of Maryland as a whole body, but we can't really, at this point, take an action for an individual person. In addition, it would require additional staff to be able to do that, and you'll note that I mentioned that. That's in the fiscal note, and I mentioned it in my letter that I included as well. And we think it's important that you realize how difficult it would be for us to do that. It's also something that's not necessarily appropriate in some cases. Many people would have the ability and the actionable right to take a case in court on their own if they feel it's something that they should be doing. Whenever you take an action on behalf of a citizen against an association, you actually cost the association money, and that goes back to those very people that you're trying to help. So we try not to be involved in situations where we're taking actions against communities. We try to resolve those amicably and not be in those situations. But there are always going to be situations we can't resolve for that one individual. And that one individual may not be happy, but they have a right to go to court. And it would not be appropriate to be through our office. So for those reasons, we ask for favorable support with that amendment.
Okay, thank you. Linda Dorsey Walker, welcome.
Welcome to my many Baltimore County colleagues. Let me just say this. I'm Linda Dorsey Walker. As many of you know, I've been around for a while. Our vice chair knows how long I've been around, since 1994. And I wear many hats. One of the hats I've worn in my lifetime is staffing the Baltimore County Human Relations Commission. In addition, I've been the president of the Lionswood Homeowners Association. I will tell you that there are a lot of horror stories out there that need to be addressed, and that's why this Bill of Rights is absolutely necessary, such as, imagine this, someone is disabled, they own one of these extra wide vans. They live in a community that's regulated by an HOA. They decide there is a need to widen the width of their driveway from the original width to accommodate not only the width of the van, but also a wheelchair. So they widen it, and then they go on vacation. In the interim, while they're on vacation, a non-existent, inactive architectural review committee shows up and decides, we don't like the paving stone they used. The paving stone is different from the rest of the neighbors, so let's tear it up. And so then the person returns from vacation, attempts to get out of the wheelchair accommodated van, and falls flat into a muddy area on a cold day and lies there for an hour. This is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed by Bill of Rights. Another scenario we faced. A group of individuals decided that they didn't like the height of the neighbor's trees because of the ethnicity. They came in and cut down the trees. The amendment that I'm recommending is this.
And I'm sorry, Linda, if you could wrap up.
Okay. I've submitted the amendment. I'm in favor of it with amendment. A resident occupant of a common ownership community who has been designated by a resident owner in writing to represent that owner's household interests shall be permitted to participate in the condominium or HOA meetings, hearings, votes, elections to office, activities, and use of facilities and amenities in a manner that is indistinguishable from the resident owner of any household. Designees of the resident owner may be an adult relative or renter who occupies the
I'm sorry,
resident.
Linda, if you could just, if you have submitted your amendment language through your testimony, we can.
I submitted it, and the reason I did it is because now we have many older people who are no longer active in the HOAs, and they want their adult children to speak for them.
Great, thank you. Okay, any questions for any of the witnesses who are favorable with amendments? What's that?
Yeah, I think there's some folks on
Oh,
the
some more
video.
virtual, okay. Oh. Oh, my apologies. You are correct, Delegate Terraza. We do have two virtual witnesses. First is Alex Hikimian.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
My name is Alex Hikimian. I'm a longtime resident of Columbia, and I served on the General Assembly's task force on common ownership communities that Delegate Holmes referenced. And I wholeheartedly support House Bill 29. And to save some time, I did send in my testimony, but I'll paraphrase a few portions of it. But I also want to respond to the Attorney General's office about their resistance to the Bill of Rights, specifically one of the rights that calls for direct action. Many people like me have gone to the Attorney General's office to have a violation, an alleged violation of state law corrected when an HOA appears to be violating one of the, for instance, the Maryland Homeowners Association Act requirements. And when that's done, they try to bring together the HOA and the resident in mediation. That's their first action. The problem with that process has been that if the violator chooses to just reject the allegation and or simply doesn't want to do mediation, then the Attorney General's office typically drops the whole issue. And so that gives comfort to the violator to continue violating. And that's a serious concern of a lot of people in homeowners associations and condo associations. And I did submit an amendment and
If you could wrap up, please.
Yes, so I did submit an amendment that would be helpful, and it's in my written testimony that I submitted. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next, Kim Glaudet.
Hi, my name is Kim Glaudet, and I too helped serve on the committee with Delegate Holmes regarding this bill. I also serve on the board for the Maryland Homeowners Association as a director, and with Delegate Holmes, he also serves as a director on that board. And a Bill of Rights is needed for the state of Maryland more than ever to protect homeowners that live in HOA and condo communities. The CCOC in Montgomery County already has a Bill of Rights for their homeowners. And homeowners living in these communities need to be protected. Furthermore, if the governing documents for that community are not referenced as part of the Maryland Homeowners Association Acts, the Office of the Attorney General has no enforcement. With that being said, a homeowner is forced to hire an attorney on their behalf to correct some of the unjust and unfair actions of the board and management companies. This can cost the homeowner thousands of dollars in some cases and possibly lead to the homeowner losing their property. Too many times there have been situations in HOA and condo communities involving non-transparency of HOA financial records, meetings or minutes for those meetings, improper elections or appointments to the board, decisions being made by management companies and board members who are uneducated and ignorant of their own governing documents. Decisions being made by unlicensed management property companies and untrained board members for their own personal and financial gains, many times resulting in misappropriation of funds and loss of property values for that community. Right now, I'm in the middle of a lawsuit with my own HOA because of them doing nefarious acts against me, because me finding out that they misappropriated funds. And I cannot get help from the Attorney General's office, as many complaints as I filed about unjust elections being held. So this bill is indeed, it needs to be passed. These are just few of the issues with HOA and condo communities in the state of Maryland. And the Bill of Rights to protect homeowners living in those communities. I urge you to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions for the witnesses who are favorable with amendments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to the one person who signed up as unfavorable, Dana Schultz. Delegate Boyce, did you have a question? Sure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Delegate Holmes and I believe the AG's office, did the task force state that the AG's office should manage some of this? And if not, this goes back to, wanting to make this work, who should be helping to manage?
The 2006 final report did not specify, I don't think, that the AG's office, but the issue in terms of who should, it is because the AG's office is the kind of the default agency that takes care of these HOA issues. That's why it's tagged into the legislation.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Delegate. Yes, ma'am.
Agreed. I don't believe it was covered in the 2006. I was not part of the task force that Delegate Holmes recently conducted, and our office was not part of that task force, but assuming from the legislation, that's what they were looking for.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Holmes. That concludes the hearing for House Bill 29. Next, why don't you move on to House Bill 80?
House Bill 80. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to be a community manager in the state of Maryland, you need one thing. You need a business card from Staples that says you're a community manager. That's all you need. That's the only thing you need to become a community manager in the state of Maryland. No license requirements, nothing. Now, oh God. In terms of licensing in the state of Maryland, how many occupations are licensed in the state of Maryland? Appraisers, appraisal management companies, home inspectors, architects, athlete agents, barbers, cemetery oversight, certified interior designers, certified public accountants, cosmetologists, electricians, elevator safety, landscape architects, foresters, HVAC workers, home improvement workers, individual tax preparer, land surveyors, locksmiths, oil and gas land professionals, pilots, plumbers, professional engineers, real estate agents, and brokers. And the list goes on and on. But those who are responsible for managing and oversight of millions and millions of dollars are not required to be licensed in the state of Maryland. And I find that quite objectionable, quite frankly. Even with the Community Association Institute, in their website, they suggest that if licensure is going to take place, then community managers should be licensed individually and not the community management companies itself. And I don't recall anything in my bill that requires management companies to be licensed. It's the individuals, just like brokers, agents, etc. And you're going to hear from others where community management companies have absconded with millions, plural, of dollars. There's also been some discussion about management companies and being licensed is a tax structure. Your appraiser, is that a tax structure? Your plumber, are you being taxed there? These are regular types of fees that these people pay to become a community manager. I am certified to be a community manager. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I am strongly suggesting that we need to have a community manager license structure in the state of Maryland. The 2006 task force that we talked about earlier, in 2006, it was strongly suggested that community managers be licensed as well. How much longer are we going to continue to banter about this discussion about community managers being licensed? I think it's time to get it done. We passed this bill out of the House last year. We passed this bill out of the House the year before that, and it got stuck in the Senate. So we have a history of getting the bill passed. I think we should do it again. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes. We also have testifying in favor Karen Strawn and Linda Dorsey Walker. So if you both want to come up to the witness table.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, once again, my name is Karen Strawn, and I'm with the Office of the Attorney General Consumer Protection Division. We think that a property management bill is very important. We have supported this bill in the past, and we continue to support it today. The reason it is so important is exactly what Delegate Holmes told you, that all it takes is a business card. There is no training, there is no education, there is no anything to make sure that these companies that these property managers know what they're doing and are providing adequate, good legal advice or regular advice of any kind to these associations. There have been associations in the past, I'm sure you all have heard of Legacy Management, who took down a number of associations because they stole millions and millions of dollars. There was also an association a couple years ago that our office took action against, a property manager that our office took action against because they stole over $2 million from associations in Maryland. And we'd like to ensure that we can make sure these individuals are properly trained, licensed individuals to go forward and give the advice that they need to. By following this, by following this legislation and ensuring training and education, we ensure that associations get the right information. Associations are not required to have a property manager, but if they do have a property manager, we'd like to make sure that they're getting the right advice. I know I spoke to some property managers the other day and was surprised to hear that they were doing things that were not in compliance with what the laws require, and were surprised to find out what the laws were. If you don't know the laws, why are you even doing this type of work? So for these reasons, we urge support of this bill.
Thank you. Linda?
Yes, again, I'm Linda Dorsey Walker, and I would add that I also sit on and have sat on for the last 2.5 years the Consumer Council of the Office of the Attorney General's, although I'm testifying today as a private citizen. The reason that licensure is needed for common ownership community property management organizations is because there is rampant abuse. In one particular situation, my own in my community, we had a community management organization that was, a property management organization that intervened to take over our community, despite the fact that 95% of the homeowners voted against them taking over. They nevertheless had an arrangement with 3 people on the board of directors, and they got them to sign a contract. And they said, we're going to enforce that contract despite 95. So when someone asked earlier, I didn't know there were any unfair things going on, that's an example of unfair. Afterwards, we had situations where we tried to contact some of the property management organizations in communities surrounding us. They were unwilling to give out names of even board officers, board of directors' names, contact information from our group or their group. So we have situations where if there's a crime situation going on in a community or communities that want to act together, it's almost impossible because there's no standards saying who has to give out what information, whether it has to be done on a timely basis, whether or not you get to see the budget that is impacting how much assessment you pay on a timely basis. Those are the kinds of abuses that are taking place because there's no regulation of what they do, how they do it, and when they do it. I urge your favorable support of this.
Okay, we have a couple of we have a couple of questions. First question goes to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my questions are for the esteemed Chairman Holmes. Two questions. One, are you talking about, it's unclear to me if you're talking about managers who are hired by the board, or would these be members of the board who might act as managers in a volunteer basis?
I got you. Board members are volunteers. In a common ownership community, most common ownership communities hire a community manager. The community manager works at will of the board of directors. The problem is that sometimes these board of directors, sometimes these community managers do not actually know the laws that they're supposed to be following to assist the board of directors, because the board of directors are not required to be trained, and so the community managers are supposed to oversee how the common ownership community moves forward.
Okay, thank you for that. And then if I could, another question, Mr. Chair, quickly. Are you aware, Delegate Holmes, of any requirements that there be fidelity bonds associated with these organizations to cover the situations that have been outlined here about people absconding with funds and, all the problems that are caused with the fiscal management?
In most governing documents for common ownership communities, when I say most, I'm sure it's got to be at least 99.99%. The governing documents require a fiduciary insurance policy, and that is to cover the wrongdoing or the mistakes of the board of directors. So if the board of directors are voting on something and they get something wrong and the lot owners or the unit owners sue, they have their insurance to cover them.
But not the not the manager?
Managers have their own insurance.
They do? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. They have their own insurance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Delegate Holmes, I'm hoping I can drive your point home by asking this question. How many property managers are there in the state?
I am so glad you asked that question. The reason why we do not know the amount of property managers are out there because we have no idea how many people went to Staples.
So is it fair to say, Delegate Holmes, through this licensing process, not only would folks be educated, but in the state of Maryland, we would know who were property managers and we would be able to appropriately locate them and then hold them accountable should there be an issue?
You are so insightful.
Management.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Delegate.
Can I?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Holmes, for bringing this forth. It's important. Is there a unit limit of when that kicks in?
No. There's no. When you say
duplex or something, if you were managing that?
No, sir. When you say unit number, I'm assuming you're talking about 5 lots, 10 lots, 15 lots, et cetera. Answer to your question is no. Sometimes a group of lot owners, no matter how many or how few, may decide to manage themselves. But there are, for example, 8 lots where they have a board of director and they also have a community manager over top of them. Okay? So there is no lot number or unit number minimum in this bill. It doesn't really matter.
So I manage my own property, so am I gonna have to register?
No. This is for common ownership communities only. And common ownership communities are HOAs, condos, and cooperatives.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing?
I'm sorry.
Can I say something?
Sir?
HOAs are business entities that are registered and have to file on an annual basis by April 15th of every year as a business entity with the State
So
Assessment and Taxation Office.
That what kicks in this bill.
Yes, and at the time, you have to show any revisions you've made to any of your bylaws or anything else. You have to state who are your current officers. But when a property management company takes over, they do the filing. In some cases, communities have lost their status because they failed to do it on a timely basis. In order for you to sell your home, in our case, we're talking $500,000 homes. People can't sell their homes because the property management company may or may not have filed the paperwork on a timely basis. And so people's property sales are being held up. As a former officer, I have people still calling me years after I've stopped being president because they are anxious because things are not being done quite as they anticipated.
Then I'm sure you did it in a timely fashion. And
Oh,
took care of it when
absolutely.
that's why they're calling you.
Also, the reason that we moved to a property management company was my term was ending, and they decided, well, who's going to do all this work? Collecting. We had a lot of arrearages when I took over, and we caught up on it. And for the first time, we had this huge surplus of money. Then they brought in a property management company, and now we have more arrearages than we had before.
Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes, for bringing this important bill. I just want to clarify, this bill does not apply to the HOA itself. It applies to somebody holding themselves out, handing out that card, they got it.
That is correct.
Right. And so this is just about somebody who's holding themselves out as having the expertise of being a property manager and saying, well, that person has to have some certification.
You are absolutely correct.
Okay.
It's just like a real estate agent. A real estate agent has to go through training, has to go through and pay the fee to be a licensed real estate agent, have a license.
Right. And so it doesn't kick in because you have an HOA. It kicks in because somebody's holding them out and the HOA is hiring them. The HOA itself could decide to self-manage. I mean,
that is correct.
Right. They could decide, no matter what size they are, they could be 1 unit. I don't know why you'd want to have an HOA 1 unit, but 2 units, 10 units, 100 units. They can just manage themselves. It's when they hire somebody, that person would have a requirement.
That is correct. Just like you could sell your own house, but if you hire a real estate agent, the real estate agent must be licensed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Holmes, I am trying to catch up really quick by looking over this. I noticed that there is an exception or some reference to a law firm or attorneys. Can you elaborate on that?
In that section of the bill, it talks, I'm going from memory here now. In that section of the bill, it talks about someone who works for the community manager. And if you work, and as almost like an employee kind of person in that section of the bill. I'll have to find it and get additional clarification for you. I recall off the top of my head.
Could I rephrase that question, sir?
Yes.
Would an attorney have to be licensed also?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Just like attorney doesn't have to be licensed for a real estate agent either.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I figure that's where you're going.
Okay. All righty then. We have signed up favorable with amendments, Kim Glaude, who is virtual. Kim?
Yes, hi, how are you? I'm Kim Glaude. I am in favor of House Bill 0080. It is a need. It's important that we have licensed management companies. Roughly roughly in 2013, I discovered that my HOA had misappropriated funds close to $1 million. One lone board member who wasn't even on the board voted in, never, since he bought in this property management company. Since this property management company has been here, we have not had access to our budgets. If homeowners ask to see the budgets, according to MHA 11B 112, they are denied. They're given excuses. The manager is allowed to do whatever they want to do to homeowners. Our budgets have been inflated. There is definitely a need for this bill to be passed. Like Delegate Holmes is saying, you know, you can go to Staples and get a business card and call yourself a management company. Board members need to be trained so that they can know how to deal with management companies that come in and try to take advantage. Like my community, a management company has come in and taken total advantage of my whole community. People in my neighborhood don't even know who the board members are. They never, everything on, when they send out a notice of something, and the board members' names are never listed. They're doing improper elections right now. The management company, you're supposed to have a nominations committee. And like Delegate Holmes said, for the outside, the management company has taken control over all of that. So they definitely need to be educated. And I think that I would suggest amending the bill to include a standard operating procedure for all licensed management companies, holding them accountable with monetary fines if they do not follow procedure. So please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There appear to be no questions for you. We have two people signed up in opposition, both virtual, Dana Schultz and Lee Greenwood. Well, we've got Lee, so Lee, why don't you go? You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Lee Greenwood, and I am here on behalf of Associa. Associa is the largest national management company in the country. We manage HOAs, condos, etc. And we have a long history of doing this, over 4 decades on the national stage. We are active in nearly 40 states now. In Maryland, we've been active for over 3 decades. We have hundreds of Maryland-based employees. We manage over 85,000 units in hundreds of communities across the state. We've been here for a while and we know the market well. Simply put, HB 80 represents a solution in search of a problem. There are nearly 1.1 million residents throughout the state who live in an association of one form or another, an HOA, a condo, or a co-op. And the vast majority of them, our data shows that upwards of 90% are happy with their experience. And nearly 3/4 of those 1.1 million residents oppose new regulations like this. And that we see those numbers reflected in other states as well, which is why only 8 states currently license managers of this sort. And actually the trend is moving away from it. In Colorado, they, within the last few years, removed their licensure requirements. And in Virginia, there's talk of doing that as well. The Obama administration also looked at licensure, professional licensure, and they found that the intention, which was to protect the consumers, was just not backed up by the data. That, in other words, licensure doesn't do what we're hoping it does. I know my time is running out, so I just did want to note that there is a fiscal note attached to this, and you know, it's $100,000, I believe, in the first year, and the Department of Labor has said, I want to get the numbers right, that by FY28, that there will be the need for 13 full-time employees to handle this at a cost of about $1.3 million a year.
Okay, well, we've got a question here. Well, before I go to questions, is Dana Schultz with us? Okay, we'll go straight to questions. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Sorry. In your testimony written in just now, you mentioned how many units are in in Maryland. You mentioned the 200 communities across the state. You mentioned that you've been around for 3 decades, but the question you didn't answer and you glossed over is how many actual managers are in the state of Maryland? Do you know?
Are you talking that work for Associa or?
Sure, that work for Associa or that you know of.
So I certainly don't have an answer for the second part. The first part is I don't know an answer. We have about 200 employees in the state of Maryland. Certainly not all of those are managers, but.
So you don't know?
I don't have a concrete answer, but I certainly can get an answer for you as far as Associa's footprint here.
Thank you so much. And I want to make clear that last year I asked this very same question and there was no answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mr. Greenwood, I believe. You've made references to data in your testimony oral. I'm just wondering, have you provided where you're getting this data from? Is it sourced through your own independent sources or readily available to the committee as a whole, this data you keep referencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the statistics I referenced are all referenced in my written testimony that I submitted to the committee. And I just want to clarify, when I said 85,000 units, those are just the numbers that Associa is managing in the state. There's certainly others, there's 1.1 million residents. That's not just that Associa. We are not managing properties with 1.1 million people, residents. That's the entire state has around that number living in an association. And yes, those are all referenced in footnotes in my written submitted testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There appear to be no further questions. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 80. It is 5:38, and we will go to House Bill 105. Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 105 is a relatively simple piece of legislation, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you'd be glad to hear that. This is in reference to governing bodies and annual meetings. The largest portion of this bill is relevant to when transition takes place from the declarant to the unit owners or lot owners in a common ownership community. What this bill says is if there are, once a community is transitioned and they have 25% lot owners or unit owners purchasing it from the declarant, then the declarant must have one person from the unit owner or lot owner as a board member. The other portion of the bill talks about bonds when a declarant constructs a new HOA or condo. Sometimes the roadway systems, as an example, are not yet complete, and the bonds, once the roadway systems are completed, the bonds are released. What this says is that before the bonds are released, the declarant must notify the board members that the bonds are being released, just so that they are aware. I want to make it clear that the board members have no right to interfere with the jurisdictions to release the bonds, but I thought it important that at least the unit owners have an opportunity to see that the bonds have been requested to be released so that they can see that the declarant is going to be getting off their bonds, just in case the unit owners or lot owners see that the construction hasn't been completed as the declarant says, and or if the county assumes that it has been, some of the unit owners or lot owners can notify the jurisdiction. Again, the unit owners or lot owners do not have any ability to stop the county from releasing the bonds. I just want them to be notified. That's all it does.
We have Karen Strawn and Linda Dorsey Walker, who are signed up to testify in favor. And then we will go to Bob Enton, we'll just do the people in favor, take questions, then we'll go favorable with amendments. So go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, once again, my name is Karen Strawn, and I'm with the Consumer Protection Division of the Office of the Attorney General. Delegate Holmes has clearly explained the 4 basic things that this bill does. The reason this is so important is because there is very few laws that really cover when it is still under developer control before it transfers to the control of the association. There's a lot of opportunity to have no transparency to people who are living in the community. There's a lot of opportunity for problems if there are single accounts being held in which the developer puts not only their operating expenses, but also the association funds. These are things that cause problems and things that we get complaints about. You know, we get complaints because the developer is not having meetings. Well, unfortunately, right now, there isn't a requirement that the developer have a meeting at all before it transfers to association control. So that's why it's important to have these things in, so that there is some transparency about what is happening, and so that when the association gets ready to accept transfer of the properties from the developer, that there are not problems with the funds, anything of that nature, that it's clear what money belongs to the association and is there to make sure that the association can meet its reserves, can meet its standing obligations, all of that. And just to clarify, because I know that one of the things that Mr. Enton is going to testify about, if he is consistent with prior years, is the notice about the bonds. And Mr. Delegate Holmes has been very clear. It is not, we understand they're not a party to the bond when they're a unit owner, but we do get complaints that the roads have not been completed, and when we find out that the balance have already been released, it's too late to do anything and too late to hold the developer. And this way they can notify the county so that the county can make a decision as to whether or not they should go forward with releasing the bond. So for these reasons, we urge support of this bill.
Yes, Linda Dorsey Walker, again, testifying in favor of House Bill 105. I think from the previous speaker that spoke against the last bill, I think you now understand we're not just talking about something trivial. Name me one other profession in which you have control over 1 million Maryland lives in which that profession is going unregulated. 1 million Marylanders fall under these HOAs. These aren't mom and pop shops. These people have hundreds of employees. Go right now to your cell phone and look up property management companies, and they are rated from 0 to 5. Look at how many of them have ratings of 1, 2, 3. Almost none have a rating of 4 or 5. The reason that I also introduced the amendment before is because of the need to make sure that we have total involvement by everyone in the processing of what has to go on with the property management company. Again, in some of the older communities, the HOAs, the older citizens have aged out. Many of them are fragile, older citizens. They want their adult citizens, children, to run for office now or vote on their behalf. In our community, we have several houses that are owned by the Salvation Army and used as their executive homes as they rotate through Maryland. They never get a vote, even though those people may stay for 5 years at a time. We want every member of the community to be an active voting member in the community, every household in the community. And so that can't be done unless we have this in place stating, that you're going to actually, well, again, I'm going to ask you to vote in favor of it.
Thank you very much. Of course, collectively speaking, we are in charge of $63 billion worth of budgets, and some people would say we're totally unqualified for that. Okay. Questions? Any questions? There appear to be no questions for you, so you did a good job. Bob Enton has signed up favorable with amendments. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Delegate Love, Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association, testifying for the 3rd time today favorable with amendments. I will point out to the committee that C.T. Wilson, the chairman of House Economic Matters, when I come to the witness stand, always says, our next witness is Dr. No, Bob Enton. So I've told him that this year I'm becoming Dr. Yes. And having said all that, this bill was in last year. We had two concerns with the bill last year. One concern was dealing with the language in the bill that deals with the 25% of the votes in the condominium. We don't have a problem with that, but what's not clear in the bill and needs to be clarified, and we worked on this last year with Delegate Holmes, was you have a condominium regime and it's got 5 towers. But that's the regime covers all 5 towers. The question is, if one tower is built, does that then trigger as 25% of the regime is occupied? And Delegate Holmes is is nodding his head. He remembers that issue.
I got you.
The other issue is the bond language. And, once again, I mean, I just don't understand if the homeowner or the condo unit owner has an issue, nothing prevents them from checking with the local government to ask, is there a bond and what's the status of it? But we don't think it's appropriate necessarily to put that burden on the developer to disclose what the phone number of the person that they should contact at the bonding company. These bonds may be in place for 2 years. So if there's a problem with the roadways or whatever it is, and somebody that lives there, wants to find out if there's a bond, all they got to do is pick up the phone and call the local government and find out. So we don't think that language is appropriate. We didn't think it was appropriate last year, and we don't think it's appropriate this year, with all due respect to my good friend Delegate Holmes.
All right. We also have signed up virtually Kim Glod, who is favorable with amendments. Kim, are you still with us? And you are.
Yes, I'm still with you. I am favorable of this amendment. Is this bill talking about real property condominiums and homeowner association governing bodies and annual meetings? Is that what this bill is? 105?
105.
Yeah, that's what the title of it is, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Many homeowners association board of directors do not give homeowners the opportunity to speak freely and honestly about community concerns that affect the community as a whole. This can impact members, especially if a member is trying to give important information to members of their community about deceptive practices of board of management company. Oftentimes, the board of management company will obstruct the homeowner from relaying important factual information by not allowing them to speak during the meeting process. Myself and other homeowners throughout the state of Maryland who live in HOA communities have been a victim of such actions since the beginning of meetings held online through Zoom. More of these instances have occurred involving board members and management company representatives disabling the chat box and muting mics during open meetings in order to pass fiscal budgets and to call for an adjournment for lack of a member or board of director quorum. Homeowners should always have the opportunity to express their concerns at open meetings without prejudice. I would suggest amending this bill to include penalties and monetary fines directed at board members and management companies who intentionally violate House Bill 105. I would also make it mandatory that at least 1 to 2 meetings be held in person. Thank you.
Hey, are there any questions? Well, I have a question for the sponsor. I can't remember, did we amend the bill to take care of Mr. Enton's concerns last year, or what did we do?
Last year, we did have some language, and it wasn't quite 100% agreed upon last year. We will be working with Mr. Enton and others this year to finalize it, because there's a fine line between where Bob is and where others are, particularly when we start talking about common ownership communities that are built in phases. And when they start being built in phases is where the confusion comes in. For example, prior to me, there are subdivisions where there are 1,200 units, for example. A declarant never builds 1,200 units all at one time. Right. they will build those 1,200 units in phases, simply because of the cost, et cetera. Now, the problem comes in definitionally is if you have, for example, 12 phases, 100 units each, if each phase has its own separate LLC unit, condominium or HOA unit, that particular 100 units should fall into this when 25 people purchase that 100 units. I think where Bob is going to is that he wants to have 25% of the 1,200 units as opposed to my example, the 100 units. We'll work something out.
Okay, good. You can work it out. To paraphrase the Beatles in a song of theirs. Okay, so that appears to be the end of the public hearing for that bill and this first session. I actually think Trish and Quinn did a good job of getting this. Okay, great, and you're running the timer. So apparently the virtual testimony was a complete disaster in the Judiciary Committee, and it's totally not a complete disaster. It worked really well here, so very happy with all that. Any announcements before we adjourn here? Any announcements? Okay, if not, we're adjourned.
Yes. I do remember now. Now, when I was ordered, they did not mention the community, but I do recall